I ain't gonna be the one looking after the old lady. My husband's sharp words sliced through the air, echoed by my sister-in-law's agreement. Stunned, my brother-in-law and I exchanged glances, frozen in disbelief. Why don't you and Sarah take care of her if you're so concerned? We don't need the burden of an old woman in our home, spat my sister-in-law, her tone dripping with disdain. My husband remained silent, his lack of remorse chilling. How could they discard their own parents so callously, those who had raised and loved them? Anger simmered within me for the first time in my life. But my husband and sister-in-law were blind to a surprising truth about my mother-in-law. Sarah and her family will be taking care of me. Do you think $1 million will cover the car and accessible living accommodations? The revelation stunned us all, my mother-in-law's unexpected declaration hanging heavy in the air. In that moment, my husband and sister-in-law unwittingly sealed their fate, oblivious to the consequences of their words. My name is Sarah. At 40, I found solace in my career as an art teacher, inspired by my parents' artistic legacy. I married Gavin, Emily's son, and we raised two beautiful daughters, Autumn and Kate. Life was peaceful until the harsh reality struck. My mother-in-law suffered a stroke. She had always been a kind soul, treating me like her own daughter since childhood. But after Ryder, my father-in-law, passed away, she seemed to lose her spirit. I noticed a change in my mother-in-law's demeanor and made it a point to visit her often with my kids. We'd spend quality time together, even venturing out on outings that seemed to lift her spirits. But one day, I received a frantic call from my children informing me that she had collapsed. Without a second thought, I rushed to the hospital, hastily explaining the situation to my understanding boss at the art school where I taught. Upon arrival, I was met with a scene that left me speechless. My husband, sister-in-law, and kids were engaged in a heated exchange. Dad, Aunt, why would you say something like that? Grandma is your real mom, right? My children's innocent voices pleaded, only to be met with my husband's sharp retort. Shut up. You kids have no business in this. Keep your mouth shut. Witnessing my husband shouting at our children in the hospital, and my sister-in-law glaring at them, I intervened, desperately trying to diffuse the tension. What's going on here? Calm down, I urged, struggling to catch my breath. But instead of cooperation, my husband and sister-in-law unloaded the situation onto me and swiftly left. It wasn't the first time my husband had treated our children and me differently, showing little concern for our well-being. Despite his part-time job, which kept him occupied for 4 days a week, he failed to contribute significantly to our family's finances. Worse yet, he squandered what little he earned on himself, leaving little for our needs. His absence extended beyond his job, with him rarely present at home. Even when he was preoccupied with his phone or lost in a comic book, ignoring my pleas for help with household chores and quality time with our kids. It was a stark contrast to the generosity we had experienced from my parents-in-law's friends when we first started our family. I never imagined our life would take this turn. It leads me to question if I should have given more thought to my choice of life partner. As for my sister-in-law, she mirrors my husband's indifference towards me, our children, and even our mother-in-law. It's not just with her, she treated my father-in-law the same when he was alive. Her sole interest seems to be her job as a hostess where she entertains young men. Consequently, she neglects household chores and caring for our shared home. Whenever our mother-in-law attempts to communicate with her, she snaps back with disdain, prioritizing her own time and needs. The saying, "the same parents' hearts are unknown to their children," couldn't ring truer in this situation, or rather, it's even worse. Witnessing such atrocious behavior from my husband and sister-in-law left me speechless. Yet amidst this turmoil, my main concern remained with my mother-in-law, who was undergoing surgery. Prayers for her well-being filled my thoughts as I navigated through the chaos. Amidst it all, a familiar face arrived at the hospital, someone I had called on our way there. "Sister-in-law, how is Mom doing?" Shane, my husband's younger brother, stood before me, accompanied by his wife Maya and their twin daughters who were the same age as our children. Panting and drenched in sweat, they had rushed to be with us. Shane had found success as a novelist, his hobby-turned-career flourishing after one of his novels became a hit online during his university days. He married Mia 2 years after graduating and welcomed twin daughters. Now, they lived peacefully in the city, away from the family home. "She's still in surgery. It's uncertain what will happen," I informed them, grateful for their presence amidst the uncertainty. I wished I could offer words of reassurance, but faced with such uncertainty, my attempts felt feeble. However, the younger brother-in-law appeared slightly relieved, a stark contrast to the tension radiating from his older siblings. Unlike my husband and sister-in-law, he genuinely cared for us and our mother-in-law. Concerned about her aging and widowhood, he remained in close contact, frequently bringing his family back to their parents' house to check on her. These visits served as a source of comfort and strength for our mother-in-law. My in-laws, inherently kind souls, always avoided unnecessary conflict with my husband, sister-in-law, and brother-in-law since childhood. Sadly, this may have inadvertently contributed to my husband and sister-in-law's current demeanor. Yet amidst the discord, my brother-in-law emerged as a beacon of decency. Hours later, the surgery concluded and the doctor ushered us into a small room. "We've done all we could. She'll survive, but there will be lingering effects. She'll require round-the-clock care," the doctor disclosed, leaving us breathless. The prospect of my mother-in-law's recovery filled me with hope. Neglecting her care would mean enduring more interactions with my husband and sister-in-law than I cared for. Despite our reservations, my brother-in-law and I resolved to involve them. After thorough explanation and persuasion, they reluctantly agreed. Gathering at my in-laws' house, we convened a meeting while our mother-in-law remained hospitalized. Both my husband and sister-in-law attended, but their demeanor quickly soared as complaints poured forth. They adamantly declared their disinterest in caring for our mother-in-law. "I've taken care of that old hag." "Same here." Those appalling words from my husband left both my brother-in-law's family and me frozen. "Brother, sister, don't joke at a time like this. If you won't look after her, what's going to happen to Mom? Why should we care? You and Sarah can take care of her," my sister-in-law dismissively replied, fiddling with her beautifully manicured nails. My husband, too, nodded with a bored expression etched on his face. "Then we should consider placing mother-in-law in a nursing home." "What nonsense. You're suggesting we use our money for that old woman? A nursing home? Are you kidding? That's just throwing money down the drain." My brother-in-law finally erupted at their outrageous remarks. "So you're seriously abandoning Mom, not willing to care for her or even put her in a facility? Shane, you're being annoying. If you're so concerned, why don't you and Sarah take care of her? We don't need a senile old creature around," my sister-in-law spat out, her expression deeply exasperated. My husband, too, showed signs of frustration. Unable to stay silent any longer, I interjected, "Hold on, what's the meaning of this? She's your mother, and Gavin's and Shane's right. As if we cared just because she's our mom. Why do you assume we have to take care of her? Shane is her son too, so you and Shane can take care of her. Sarah, you don't have formal qualifications, but you've been caring for Mom almost every day, right? So looking after her should be a piece of cake for you, right?" With that, my sister-in-law smirked in the most disgusting way, and I no longer had the energy to argue. The situation was the same for my brother-in-law's family. We decided to bring this issue up with mother-in-law first. As we were leaving their home, my husband smirked unpleasantly, saying he wouldn't be coming home until this issue was settled. That they would so easily abandon their own mother, who had raised and loved them, left me in disbelief. For the first time in my life, I felt a deep sense of dismay. Days later, a deep anger simmered within me as my brother-in-law's family and I visited the hospital where mother-in-law lay admitted. Stepping into her hospital room, we were met with a faint smile on her lips, a feeble attempt to mask her pain. "Oh, Sarah and Shane, I'm sorry for being a bother," she murmured weakly. Each visit, she'd apologize, tugging at our hearts. "Mom, don't say such things. Look, we've brought your favorite grapes and pears. If there's anything else you'd like to eat, just tell us, and we'll get it for you," I reassured her, offering a semblance of comfort amidst the sterile hospital setting. While mother-in-law's spirits had improved, her condition remained precarious. As a side effect mentioned by the doctor, she had become paralyzed on her right side, rendering simple tasks like eating an arduous feat, necessitating assistance from the nurses. Confronted with her frailty, my brother-in-law's family and I shared a silent resolve. We knew we needed to confront my husband and sister-in-law, proposing the idea of living together to care for her. "I can't believe Olivia and Gavin would do such a thing to me," mother-in-law sighed, her voice tinged with sadness. In that moment, a pang of realization struck me. She must have sensed deep down that returning home might no longer be an option. Despite it being her own house, my sister-in-law and her husband resided there. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Knowing their disposition, They'd likely treat mother-in-law like a nuisance, a burden to be managed. As frustration clouded my thoughts, I couldn't shake the looming dread of my husband and sister-in-law's return, likely coercing my mother-in-law into some sort of care facility. But amidst my turmoil, mother-in-law surprised us all with an unexpected request. "Sarah, could you please fetch the banking card from the drawer of that desk over there?" With a solemn expression, she pointed to the drawer adjacent to her hospital bed. Inside lay valuable items, including the banking card I had previously brought her from her home during a hospital visit. Perplexed by her request, I retrieved the card nonetheless. With a sense of urgency, she opened it before us, revealing its contents to my brother-in-law, his wife, and me. "I've got savings here. Could you and Shane make use of it?" Her words left us stunned. The balance displayed on the card surpassed anything we had ever seen. In that moment, I resolved to confront my husband and sister-in-law with something unexpected. A few days later, my brother-in-law and I summoned our spouses for a crucial meeting at mother-in-law's hospital. Their disdain was evident upon hearing the venue, but curiosity piqued when we mentioned that mother-in-law had important matters to discuss regarding her future. They likely assumed she had decided to relinquish the house and, of course, the money. The next day, they arrived at mother-in-law's hospital room, greeted by a gathering of myself, our children, brother-in-law, and his family. Their expressions soared as they questioned our presence. "Why are all of you here?" "Mom, we just want clarification. What exactly do you plan to do?" As questions lingered in the air, mother-in-law's face remained solemn, her response forthcoming. "I have asked Sarah and Shane to gather you all here because I have crucial matters to discuss about our future," mother-in-law began, tone firm yet somber. My husband and sister-in-law exchanged puzzled glances, unsure of what to expect. Taking a deep breath, mother-in-law continued, "As per your wishes, I will move out once I am discharged. I will no longer show up in front of you or interfere with your lives ever again." The gravity of her words hung heavy in the air as my husband and sister-in-law stared at her, their expressions akin to deer caught in headlights. "Sarah and Shane have filled me in on everything," mother-in-law continued, addressing their discomfort head-on. "The conversation you had about me in my house, the way you called me a terrible burden and planned to cast me out. I know it all." Before my husband and sister-in-law could respond, mother-in-law silenced them with a stern gaze. "Hold on, the conversation isn't over yet," she admonished, redirecting their attention back to her. "In exchange for my departure and our final goodbye, I'm asking both of you to leave the house as well," mother-in-law declared firmly. "Naturally, I will be cutting ties and excluding you from any inheritance." The shock on my husband and sister-in-law's faces was palpable. "From now on, I will be in Sarah's care. As I mentioned before, would 1 million suffice to make the house accessible and purchase a new car?" mother-in-law inquired, her gaze unwavering. Upon her insistence, I retrieved the banking card tucked away in my pocket and presented it to my husband and sister-in-law. Their disbelief was evident as they stared at the balance displayed on the card. 1 million? How? What's happening? It's impossible, my husband stammered, confusion etched on his face. It's your father's legacy money. He'd been saving all this time, mother-in-law explained calmly, revealing a truth that had been kept hidden from them. Their speechlessness mirrored our own from days before. As mother-in-law concluded her revelation, the weight of the truth settled over us all. I was planning to split this money between you two, but after understanding your true feelings, I've changed my mind, Olivia Gavin. You are no longer my children. I want you to leave this house. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the air, her tone cold and final. My husband and sister-in-law were jolted back to reality by her abrupt dismissal. What? What are you saying? Gavin and I are your legitimate children too, my sister-in-law protested, disbelief etched on her face. The only child I have is Shane. Plus, I have kind daughters-in-law Maya and Sarah. You don't know them. Start packing your belongings now, sever your ties with Shane and Sarah, and leave. Mother-in-law's words were uncompromising, leaving no room for argument. Having only ever known my mother-in-law's gentle demeanor, I was astounded to hear such harsh words from her. Her eyes bore a fierce, determined look, one that brooked no objections from my husband or sister-in-law. Though stunned into silence, I quickly collected myself, pulling out the idea card and placing it next to the bank card. Here's the thing, Gavin. I'm taking this to City Hall right after I declare what you are. Are you serious? My husband's eyes widened in shock at the sight of the divorce application I brandished. This goes to show how much you must despise me, right? Don't worry about Autumn and Kate. I'll take care of them. You just go live your life the way you want to, I declared, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. The revelation sent my husband into a fit of trembling, erupting in a loud outburst. His sister joined in, yelling and lunging at my mother-in-law. Thankfully, my brother-in-law and his wife managed to restrain them, explaining the situation to the nurses who rushed over. Security was soon called, and my husband and sister-in-law were escorted out of the building, their protests echoing through the halls. With the help of a lawyer arranged by my mother-in-law, I initiated divorce proceedings. In the end, I not only received a financial settlement but also custody of our daughters. My mother-in-law's last will and testament ensured her estranged son and daughter wouldn't inherit a thing. The family home was sold, and my ex-husband and his sister were forced to move into a shabby apartment, their constant bickering annoying their landlord and neighbors. Meanwhile, I welcomed my mother-in-law into our home after her discharge from the hospital. Together with my kids, we took care of her, maintaining a peaceful and mutually supportive relationship. Despite the challenges, we found solace in our day-to-day lives, navigating them together in harmony.
The way Mark and I met could have been ripped straight from a rom-com, a chance encounter at a mutual friend's barbecue, complete with spilled drinks and awkward apologies. He was charming, with a quick wit that had me laughing despite myself. Before I knew it, we were inseparable, our love story unfolding with an ease that felt like destiny. Our wedding was a dream, a simple yet heartfelt ceremony surrounded by those we loved. Mark, with his career and finance on the rise, was the picture of success, and his insistence on a prenuptial agreement was just another part of our planning, a practical step, he said, given our differing financial situations. I didn't mind, my love for him wasn't measured in dollars and cents. Carol, Mark's mother, was a tougher nut to crack. She looked at me like I was an unwelcome guest, her coldness stark against the warmth Mark and I shared. But love has a way of making you overlook the small stuff, and I was too happy to let her disapproval dampen my spirits. Even when we faced the heartbreaking news of Mark's infertility, my love didn't falter. If anything, it deepened. I threw myself into making our house a home, filling it with warmth and love, buying appliances and furniture with my own savings to create a cozy nest for us. But as the years passed, the warmth between us cooled, replaced by a chill I couldn't shake. Mark's demands grew, his once loving requests turning into cold commands. "Make sure breakfast is on the table before I leave, Jenna," he'd say, his voice void of the affection that used to lace his every word. And dinner? It had to be fresh, no matter how late I worked, as if my job at the Department of Health and Human Services was just a hobby compared to his high-flying career. I'd wake before dawn, bleary-eyed but determined to cook his breakfast. Then, after a long day's work, I'd rush home, racing against the clock to whip up a gourmet meal that might bring back the husband I once knew. But it was never enough. He took my efforts for granted, never once uttering a thank you, only reminding me that I should be grateful for the roof over my head, his roof. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now were battlegrounds, his words cutting deeper each time. "This is my house, Jenna. Don't forget that," he'd snap, whenever I dared to suggest anything might be amiss. Each day, as I moved through our home, touching the pieces of our life I'd built with love and care, a thought began to take root in my mind. What if I were alone? The idea, once unthinkable, now felt like a bomb. My love for Mark had been replaced by a weary resignation, worn down by his indifference and coldness. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, the realization hit me hard. I no longer recognized the man I had married, nor did I see the woman I had become in his reflection. The love that had once been my guiding light had faded, leaving behind a longing for peace, for a life where my efforts were seen, my presence valued. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, the silence of the house a stark reminder of the distance between us, I couldn't help but wonder, would I be better off alone? The thought was a whisper in the dark, a question I wasn't quite ready to answer. But with each passing day, the whisper grew louder, a call to find myself again, to reclaim the life and love I deserved. Lately, it's like I'm living with a stranger, not the man I married. Mark's been on my case for everything, the house not being spotless, the dinners being too repetitive. It's like nothing I do is ever enough. I've been finding solace in solo trips to the mall, picking out new furniture and gadgets for our home, trying to fill the void with material things. But even that joy is fleeting when I come home to his coldness. It hit me hard when I realized Mark hadn't put a single penny into our joint account for months. All the expenses, the mortgage, utilities, groceries, have been coming out of my paycheck. So, one evening, I decided it was time to confront him. I waited until he was settled in his armchair, flipping through the channels, and I brought it up, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mark, we need to talk about the finances. You haven't contributed to the joint account in months." "I've been covering everything," I said, hoping for some understanding, maybe even an apology. He barely glanced at me, his eyes still on the TV. "And? It's my house. You're just living in it. Why should I pay for your keep?" He shot back, his words sharp as knives. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Your keep? Mark, I'm your wife, not some tenant. I've been paying for everything, trying to make this house a home for both of us," I argued, feeling my temper rise. He snorted, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Look, Jenna, you're making a big deal out of nothing. If you don't like it, maybe you should just leave. But we both know you've got nowhere to go," he said, turning back to his show. I was seething, hurt and angry, but before I could respond, his phone rang. It was his mother, Carol. He answered on speaker, and before I could escape, she started in on me. "Jenna, you need to stop this nonsense and start showing some gratitude. Mark's been too good to you, and here you are, acting like a freeloader." Carol's voice was like a slap in the face. I was so shocked, I barely managed to grab the phone and hang up. "I can't believe you and your mother calling me a freeloader in my own home?" I said, my voice shaking with emotion. Mark just shrugged, unfazed. "Well, if the shoe fits." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than ever. The thought of divorce crept into my mind again, more persistent this time. But where would I go? I had no apartment, no real savings of my own. I felt trapped in a life that no longer felt like mine, married to a man who saw me as nothing more than a burden. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed and a heavy heart. As I made my way through the silent house, every room echoed with the remnants of last night's fight. I knew something had to change, but the fear of the unknown, of starting over from scratch, was paralyzing. Sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee alone, I realized I had to make a decision. Do I stay in this loveless marriage, playing the role of the grateful freeloader, or do I take a leap into the unknown, hoping to land on my feet? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was, I couldn't go on like this. The breaking point had been reached, and it was time to choose my path. That day at work was a marathon, one meeting after another, no end in sight. I glanced at the clock, knowing Mark would be fuming. "Just my luck," I muttered under my breath, finally grabbing my phone to give him a heads up. The moment he picked up, I knew I was in for it. "This is your problem, Jenna. Not mine. You should have been here, cooking dinner, not playing around at work." Mark's voice roared through the phone, loud enough for the whole office to hear. My cheeks burned as I quickly ended the call, avoiding the curious glances from my colleagues. By the time I got home, it was late, way past our usual dinner time. The house was dark, silent, but the moment I stepped in, Mark was on me like a thunderstorm. "Where have you been? A good wife would have had dinner waiting. What are you even good for?" His words were like daggers, each one slicing through the last bit of patience I had. I was tired, emotionally drained. "Mark, I had to work. You know how important this project is." I tried to explain, but it was like talking to a wall. "A bad wife and a terrible hostess. That's what you are." he continued, his voice reaching a pitch I'd never heard before. You know what? I've had enough. Pack your things and get out of my house. I stood there, shocked, as he shoved the divorce papers in my hands. You'll be homeless without me, he said with a cruel laugh. Something inside me snapped. All the years of bending backward for him, trying to be the perfect wife, vanished. Living in a shelter would be better than enduring one more day with you. I shot back, my voice steadier than I felt. Without another word, I signed the papers, my hand not shaking even a bit. I packed my things into a suitcase, the weight of my decision settling in. As I looked around the house, our house, it no longer felt like home. It was just a building, filled with broken promises and shattered dreams. I booked a room at a nearby hotel, a temporary refuge from the storm. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, I realized this was the first night in years I didn't have to worry about what Mark wanted for dinner or if the house was clean to his standards. It was just me, and strangely, it felt like a weight had been lifted. The decision to leave was hard, maybe the hardest I've ever made. But as I drifted off to sleep, a part of me felt excited for what the future might hold. For the first time in a long time, I was in charge of my own destiny, no longer tied to someone who saw me as less than. Tomorrow, I would start anew, and whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on. After the whirlwind of leaving Mark and finding myself in a hotel room, the reality of my situation began to sink in. It wasn't long before I got a call that would have once sent me spiraling. It was Carol, Mark's mom, her voice dripping with something like glee. "Jenna, dear," she practically sang into the phone. "I just heard the wonderful news. My boy has finally come to his senses and divorced you. I'm popping champagne tonight. It's a celebration, dear. He made a huge mistake marrying you, and now it's corrected." Her words, meant to wound, barely scratched the surface. I was past caring what Carol thought. "Time will tell, Carol. Time will tell," I replied calmly, a sense of detachment washing over me. I hung up, a small smile playing on my lips. For the first time in years, her barbs couldn't touch me. A week of navigating through my new reality had passed when I decided to open up to my boss about everything. The burden of pretending everything was fine was too heavy to bear alone. I expected sympathy, maybe some understanding, but what I got was a lifeline. "Jenna, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but there might be something that can help," she said, her tone shifting from comfort to businesslike. "There's a municipal housing program designed for situations like yours. It offers affordable housing solutions to those in need. I think you should apply. I'll help you." Her offer was a beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness I'd been navigating. With her guidance, I applied for the program, and to my surprise, I was accepted. The relief was immediate. It was like I could finally breathe again. Now, I'm renting a small apartment, modest, but mine. It's quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the life I left behind. There's no need to tiptoe around in the mornings, no ungrateful husband to cook for or clean up after. It's just me, and it feels liberating. Sitting in my new living room, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that led me here. It's been tough, filled with moments of doubt and fear, but also moments of unexpected kindness and newfound strength. For the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. I've got a blank canvas in front of me, and I'm ready to start painting a new life, one where my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. It's a new beginning, and I'm here for it, ready to see where this next chapter takes me. It had been a quiet few months since I started over, finding peace in the simple routines of my new life. Then, one afternoon, as I was enjoying a rare moment of calm, my phone erupted into a cacophony of rings. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen in ages, Carol, my ex-mother-in-law. My heart sank. "Why now?" Bracing myself, I answered, "Hello? Jenna, you need to come back to Mark this instant." Carol's voice screeched through the speaker, so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I sighed. "Carol, why would I ever do that?" The question was rhetorical, more for myself than for her. Because he's in trouble, that's why. That fool of a son of mine bought shares years back, took out loans, and now? He's up to his neck in debt. It's a disaster, and you need to help him sort it out. Her voice was a mix of anger and desperation. I couldn't help but laugh, not out of amusement, but sheer disbelief. Help him? Carol, do you remember the prenup? The one Mark was so eager to have? It says clearly that I'm not responsible for his debts. And let's not forget, we're divorced. His financial mess isn't my problem. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Ungrateful girl. After everything we've done for you, you're just going to abandon him? Her tone was accusatory, as if I had committed a grave sin. Everything you've done? Carol, let's be clear. The only thing you and Mark ever did was make my life miserable. And as for abandoning him, remember, he kicked me out. He made it clear I was no longer welcome in his life or his house. I retorted, my patience wearing thin. You'll regret this, Jenna. You think you're better off without him, but you're making a huge mistake. She spat out, her voice venomous. I took a deep breath, finding a calm I didn't know I had. Carol, I've spent too much of my life living in regret and fear because of you and Mark. I'm done. Mark's debts are his own doing. It's time he learns to deal with his own mess. I'm moving on with my life. Goodbye, Carol. With that, I ended the call, a sense of finality washing over me. I had expected to feel shaken, upset, maybe even guilty. But all I felt was relief. Standing up to Carol, making it clear that I was no longer part of their twisted family drama, felt like shedding a weight I'd been carrying for too long. Sitting back down, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The conversation with Carol, as unpleasant as it was, served as a stark reminder of how far I'd come. I had fought hard for my independence, my peace, and no amount of guilt-tripping could drag me back into that chaos. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly free. Free from the expectations, the criticisms, the endless cycle of trying to please people who would never see my worth. I had found my strength, my voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again. As I looked around my small apartment, a sense of pride filled me. This was my space, my sanctuary, and my new beginning. I had survived the storm and come out stronger on the other side. And no call, no matter how unexpected or unwelcome, could change that. The next morning, I woke up with a resolve as clear as day. It was time to reclaim what was mine. I rummaged through my files until I found the receipts for all the items I had poured my money into over the years. The sleek dishwasher that made Mark's life easier, the washing machine we picked out together, though, let's be honest, I paid for, and the high-end coffee machine that became the centerpiece of many of his mornings. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle, about not letting my contributions be erased and taken for granted any longer. With a moving truck booked and a couple of strong helpers at my side, I went back to the house that was no longer a home. The door opened to an eerie silence, a stark contrast to the chaos of emotion swirling inside me. As the workers started loading up the truck, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Each piece of furniture, each appliance, had a story, a memory attached to it. But as they say, you can't cling to the past if you want to move forward. Just as we were finishing up, my phone rang. I knew without looking who it was. Mark's name flashed on the screen, his call as predictable as it was unwanted. I answered, bracing myself for the storm. "Where the hell is all my stuff?" he bellowed, skipping any pretense of a greeting. "Your stuff?" I couldn't help the incredulous laugh that escaped me. "You mean the things I bought with my money?" "I've taken them back, Mark. According to our prenup, I have every right to." His curses and insults flew fast and furious, a torrent of anger that once would have cowed me. But not anymore. "Listen, Mark." I cut in, my voice steady. "I wish you the best, truly. But this is where our paths diverge for good." And with that, I hung up and blocked his number, a symbolic gesture of cutting the final tie that bound me to a life that no longer served me. As the moving truck drove away, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. This wasn't just about reclaiming my possessions, it was about reclaiming my life, my independence, and my self-worth. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them head-on my own terms. 6 months down the line, life's taken a turn I hardly dared dream of. I've snagged myself a cozy apartment in a neat part of town, all thanks to this social program my boss tipped me off about. The deal was sweet, a manageable down payment with tiny payments stretching out over the years. For the first time, I'm not just scraping by, I've got a bit of wiggle room in my budget, enough to spoil myself without worrying about anyone else's needs or wants. The day I got the keys to my place, I remember stepping through the door, the sense of ownership washing over me. It was a blank canvas, and for the first time in forever, I could paint my life exactly how I wanted. No compromises, no sacrifices, just me. I treated myself to some paints and canvases, a nod to the girl I used to be, the one who found joy in splashing watercolors around, lost in the flow of her own creativity. I even painted a self-portrait, something I'd never have dared do before. Staring at my work, I saw a woman who'd weathered storms and come out stronger, a woman who didn't need anyone else to define her worth. It was like I was seeing myself clearly for the first time, beautiful, self-sufficient, and yeah, a bit selfish, but in the best possible way. And then there's Max, my little bundle of joy, a scrappy little dog with eyes too big for his face and a heart just as oversized. Adopting him felt like the final piece of my new life clicking into place. We'd become a team, exploring the neighborhood, making the apartment our home. One evening, as Max and I were curled up on the couch, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a friend I hadn't seen since the divorce storm hit. "Heard you're doing well. Coffee sometime?" I smiled, typing out a reply. "Yeah, life's good. Coffee sounds great. My place, actually. I've got some art to show off. Look at you, all artsy and independent. Can't wait to see it. And meet Max, of course," came the reply. Laughing, I set the phone down, looking around my little apartment, my sanctuary. It's funny how life works out. Once, I thought I needed a husband, a big house, and a certain lifestyle to be happy. Now, I've got a small apartment, a dog, and my art, and I've never felt more fulfilled. "Max, buddy," I said, scratching behind his ears. "We're doing just fine on our own, aren't we?" He barked in agreement, and I laughed, feeling a surge of gratitude for my independence, for the struggles that brought me here, and for the simple joys that filled my days now. This was happiness, unfiltered and undiluted, and it was all mine. Life's taken a turn I could have never predicted a year ago. Just the other day, while having my morning coffee and scrolling through the news on my phone, I stumbled upon a headline that stopped me cold. My ex, Mark, had been declared bankrupt. His house, the one he was so proud of, the one he kicked me out of, had been sold off to cover his debts. Now, he's back living with his mom, Carol. I couldn't help the small, satisfied smile that crept up on my face. Breaking free from him was the best decision I ever made. These days, my mornings are spent wandering the park with Max, my loyal little sidekick. The fresh air, the peaceful quiet, it's a far cry from the tense, stifling atmosphere of my old life. And it's not just the walks, I found a new passion that's breathed life into my world, painting. I joined the local amateur artists club on a whim, thinking it'd be a casual hobby. But it quickly grew into something more. I started exhibiting my paintings at local shows, the vibrant colors and bold strokes a reflection of my newfound freedom and joy. At one of these exhibitions, my path crossed with someone unexpected. I was standing beside one of my pieces, a watercolor that I felt particularly proud of, when a man approached. He studied the painting with an intensity that made me curious. "That's quite beautiful," he said, nodding towards the canvas. "Did you paint this?" I couldn't hide my grin. "Yeah, I did. Thank you." We got to talking, and it turned out we had a lot in common. Before I knew it, we were sitting in a nearby cafe, chatting over coffee like old friends. He was easy to talk to, with a warmth and a sense of humor that I'd missed in my interactions for so long. He even bought my painting. "I want to see this first thing every morning," he said. "It's inspiring." That coffee turned into dinner a few days later, and then into walks in the park, Max trotting alongside us. He introduced me to his kids, two bright sparks who welcomed me with open arms and laughter. It felt natural, easy, like a piece of my life that had been missing without me even realizing it. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed and we were sitting on his porch, he turned to me. "You know, I'm really glad I bought that painting," he said, his voice soft in the twilight. I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder. "Me too. It's funny how things work out." It got me thinking about how far I'd come, from feeling trapped and hopeless to standing on the cusp of something beautiful, something new. I was free from the shadows of my past marriage, ready to dive into the future, whatever it might hold. As Max and I continued our morning walks, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The pain, the struggle, it all led me here, to a place of peace and potential. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, open-hearted and free. Life, it seems, has a way of surprising you, of turning the page when you least expect it. And as I walked, the sun breaking through the trees, I couldn't help but feel grateful for every twist, every turn that brought me here. Ready for a new chapter, I stepped forward, into the light. I'm Ava, 33, knee-deep in the world of web design, and married to Mark, a guy who could charm the socks off anyone with his goofy smile. We met back in college, at some dingy bar where the music was too loud, and the drinks were cheap. I was trying to drown my exam stress in a pint of the most watered-down beer you could imagine when Mark sidled up, all confidence and bad pickup lines. "You look like you've lost your last friend, can I apply for the position?" he had said, and despite the cheesiness, I laughed. That laugh sealed our fate. Fast forward through years of cramped apartments, late-night takeouts, and dreams bigger than our paychecks, we tied the knot, ready to start a family. But, as it turned out, dreaming was the easy part. Years went by with no baby in sight. Every negative test felt like a punch in the gut, and the silence in our home grew louder with each passing month. Mark tried to keep things light, always the joker, but I saw the strain behind his eyes. "Hey, we still got each other, right? Me, you, and this invisible baby makes 3. He'd jest, trying to wrap me in a hug as I stared off into space, wondering why something that came so easily to others was out of our reach. One chilly morning, feeling off and a bit queasy, I called in sick. Alone, with Mark off to work, I found myself staring at a pregnancy test in the bathroom. "What the heck?" I muttered to myself, the words echoing off the tiles. The silence of waiting was suffocating, and when those 2 little lines appeared, I couldn't breathe. "No freaking way," I whispered, my heart slamming against my ribs. I was still staring at the test, disbelief and joy warring in my chest, when Mark came home. He found me on the sofa, the test clutched in my hand like some precious talisman. "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, dropping his keys and coming over. We're pregnant," I managed, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. He froze, his eyes flicking down to the test and then back up to meet mine. "Are you shitting me?" he blurted out, the shock on his face mirroring my own feelings. "No, I'm not," I said, a laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. "I'm not shitting you." The moment stretched out between us, filled with a wild, disbelieving joy. Then, Mark scooped me up, twirling me around like we were in some kind of movie. "I'm gonna be a dad," he yelled, laughing, his usual reserve lost in the moment. The next day, he came home with a small box, wrapped clumsily in shiny paper. "For you," he said, a shy grin on his face. Inside was a pair of earrings, mother of pearl, shimmering softly. They were beautiful, unusual, and very noticeable. "To celebrate our little miracle," he said, his voice thick. I touched the earrings, then reached up to kiss him. "Thank you," I whispered, my eyes filling with tears. "Not just for the gift, but for this moment, for us, for everything we had endured to get here. Mark, always the one to break a sentimental moment with humor, winked and said, "Now, don't go saying I never give you anything nice." Those earrings became my talisman, a symbol of our unexpected joy, a reminder of the day everything changed. After the initial shock and joy, reality set in. Pregnancy wasn't the glowing experience I'd been sold by every happy family photo and movie. It was hard, really hard. Morning sickness should have been called all-day sickness. I was a web designer by trade, glued to my screen, but now even the faint glow made me queasy. Mark was as supportive as he could be, but there's only so much understanding a guy can have when he's not the one turning into a human barf machine. "Babe, can you try working from the bed? Maybe it'll help," he suggested one evening, finding me hunched over the trash can in our tiny office. I shot him a look, half irritated, half grateful for his clumsy attempts at problem-solving. "Yeah, 'cause coding while lying down is peak efficiency," I snapped, immediately regretting my sharpness. "Sorry, it's just, this is tough." As the weeks trudged on, my body became a foreign entity. I gained weight, my back ached constantly, and I developed a weird aversion to the smell of coffee, which used to be my morning lifeline. Mark tried to help by switching to tea, but he wasn't happy. "This is like drinking sad water," he complained one morning, staring mournfully at his mug. "I'd kill for a cup of sad water that didn't make me want to hurl," I retorted, sipping ginger tea that did nothing for my nausea but was supposed to be good for me. Work became my refuge, the one place I felt some control, even as my body rebelled. My manager, seeing my struggle, offered me the chance to work remotely. "Take care of yourself, Ava. We need you at your best, not at your breaking point," she advised over a video call, her face a pixelated mask of concern. "Thanks, I'll try not to code any bugs into the system along with the baby," I joked, grateful for her understanding. Mark was thrilled when I told him about the remote work arrangement. "That's fantastic. You can barf in the comfort of our home now," he said, wrapping me in a careful hug. "Yeah, the glamour is non-stop," I replied dryly, leaning into his warmth. But as the months wore on, the challenges only grew. Every appointment, every ultrasound, was a mix of terror and excitement. Mark was a rock, holding my hand, making bad jokes to the doctors, and promising over and over that he'd be there, no matter what. But as much as Mark was there for me, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. My body was doing something miraculous, sure, but it felt more like an alien takeover. I envied women who breezed through pregnancy, who glowed and thrived, while I barely survived. One particularly hard day, after a night of no sleep and too much heartburn, I broke down. "I don't know how I'm supposed to do this, Mark. How do women do this more than once? I feel like I'm falling apart." Mark, ever my rock, pulled me close, stroking my hair back from my tear-streaked face. Hey, we'll get through this. You're the strongest person I know. And remember, at the end of this, we get to meet our little alien overlord. That's got to be worth all the sad water and barf, right?" I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. "Yeah, I guess it is." That was our life now, a series of tough days brightened by moments of humor and love. Despite the difficulties, despite the fear and the pain, we were in it together, waiting for the day our lives would change forever. And in those hard, dark moments, that was enough to keep me going. After the baby came, I thought we'd be living in some kind of bliss. But, let me tell you, it was anything but. Our little bundle of joy? More like a tiny tyrant who refused to sleep. Night after night, it was just me, pacing the floor, trying every trick in the book to get him to settle. "Mark? Useless. I've got work in the morning," he'd grumble from under the pillows, as if I was heading off to a spa day instead of logging into my own mountain of work with a side of zombie-like exhaustion. "Great, 'cause apparently I don't work, right?" I'd snap back, bitterness creeping into my voice. It wasn't like my job just paused because I had a baby. Then, just when I thought we were getting the hang of it, life threw another curveball. I was pregnant again. The shock of it nearly bowled me over. This can't be happening, I whispered to myself, staring down at the test. 2 kids under 2? How are we going to manage? Mark's reaction? This is great news. He beamed, clearly not the one who'd have to push another human out of his body or juggle meetings with morning sickness. Great? Mark, we're barely hanging on as it is, I retorted, my stress levels skyrocketing. We'll manage. We always do, he said, but his words felt hollow. Easy for him to say. His parents, Diane and Jack, bless them, swooped in like some kind of cavalry. They'd drive in from out of town, armed with casseroles and an eagerness to help. You kids need a break, they'd insist, taking over with a competence that left me both grateful and a little resentful. Why couldn't it be this easy for us? When our daughter arrived, all those fears and frustrations seemed to melt away, at least for a little while. Holding her, everything just fit. Like she was the piece of our family puzzle we didn't know was missing. Hello, beautiful, I whispered, tears of joy replacing those of exhaustion. But the reality was, we were in over our heads. Mark was over the moon about our daughter, sure, but his solution to our chaos was to dive even deeper into work. We need the money, he'd say, a defense that was getting old. More than we need you? I'd counter, watching the gap between us grow wider with every late night and missed dinner. His parents became our lifeline, filling in the gaps, supporting us when we were too stubborn to admit we needed it. It was a weird mix of gratitude and guilt, relying on them so much. In those early days, staring down at my daughter's face, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. But as the sleepless nights stacked up and Mark's presence became more and more like a guest appearance, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were drifting further apart. Look at her, Mark. She's perfect, I'd say during one of his rare moments at home, hoping to bridge the gap between us. Yeah, she is, he'd agree, but his eyes were always on the clock, his mind elsewhere. After our second kid came into the picture, things didn't magically get easier like I hoped. Between the sleepless nights and trying to keep up with work, I noticed the pounds piling on. It wasn't just the baby weight anymore, it was stress, lack of sleep, and grabbing whatever I could eat during a rare moment of peace. Mark? He seemed more distant than ever. Where we used to crash on the couch together, exhausted but together, now there was just this cold space. I told myself it was just a phase, that we'd get back on track soon. But deep down, I was worried. His work became his excuse for everything. Late nights, weekends, even business trips that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. Meanwhile, I was killing it at work, somehow managing to juggle deadlines and diapers. The kids, bless them, were turning out to be my little motivators. Seeing them thrive, especially after I managed to get them into a decent private kindergarten, gave me a weird sense of accomplishment. But Mark and I? We were like ships passing in the night. And when he finally did drop his bombshell, it hurt like hell. You've let yourself go, he said one night, out of the blue. No lead up, no gentleness, just those words, cutting deep. I was stunned. Excuse me? He shrugged, as if he'd just commented on the weather. You're not. I'm just not attracted to you anymore. It felt like a punch to the gut. Here I was, trying to hold everything together, and this was what I got. Tears stung my eyes, but I was too proud to let them fall in front of him. So, what? You're just giving up on us? He didn't even have the decency to look conflicted. I don't know, Ava. It's just how I feel. That night, I cried myself to sleep, not sure how we'd gotten to this point. But by morning, I was done feeling sorry for myself. I decided to take control, for me and for our kids. I started eating better, joined a gym, and threw myself into my workouts with a vengeance. Mark's reaction? If you could call it that, was a big fat nothing. He noticed, sure, but he didn't care. Not really. He was too caught up in his own world, treating the kids like they were more of a burden than a blessing. "We should have thought this through," he'd say, casting a cold eye over the chaos of toys and laughter. I bit back the sharper retorts that came to mind. Arguing wouldn't change how he felt, but I couldn't help but wonder when he'd become this person, so distant from the man I'd married. Despite it all, I pressed on. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could shed the weight and the worries. Slowly, I started to see progress, feeling stronger, more like myself than I had in years. But as I changed, Mark stayed the same. Indifferent. Distant. It was like we were living separate lives under the same roof. I missed him, or at least, I missed the idea of him, of us. Our wedding anniversary was rolling around, a day that used to mean champagne toasts and stolen kisses. This year, though, it felt more like a reminder of everything that had gone sideways between Mark and me. But I'm a fighter, always have been. So, I cooked up a plan to maybe, just maybe, salvage whatever was left of us. I called Mark during one of his rare breaks at work. "Hey, our anniversary's coming up. Thought maybe we could do something special," I ventured, heart hammering. There was a pause, long enough for me to regret bringing it up. "Sure, Ava. What did you have in mind?" His voice was flat, distracted. I pressed on, nerves be damned. "How about a weekend getaway? Just us, no kids, no distractions." "Sounds expensive," was his immediate response, and I could almost hear his eyebrows raising in skepticism. I bit back a sigh. "I found a deal. It'll be nice, Mark. Like old times." He was silent for a moment. "All right, book it." "But it's your show, Ava. I'm swamped here." Not exactly the enthusiastic partner I was hoping for, but I'd take it. I went all in, booking a cozy hotel room and arranging for his parents to watch the kids. I needed, this weekend to be a turning point for us. The day before our trip, I laid out the dress I'd bought especially for the occasion. I tried to find the mother-of-pearl earrings that Mark gave me, but they were missing somewhere. It's okay, I thought, because everything else is ready. I waited for Mark at the hotel, anticipation turning to anxiety as the hours ticked by. My phone was silent, his side of the bed untouched. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I called him, my voice shaking. "Mark, where are you? You're late." "Look, Ava. I'm not coming," he said, and just like that, my fragile hope shattered. "What do you mean you're not coming? It's our anniversary, Mark." I was on my feet now, pacing the room. He sighed, a sound that felt like a slap. I can't do this, Ava. Pretend everything's okay. I'm sorry." The world spun. "So that's it? You're giving up on us?" My voice broke, the hurt too raw, too deep. "I don't know what else to do," he admitted, and the finality in his voice was a blow I wasn't prepared for. I hung up, numb. The night stretched on, endless and empty. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every second was a reminder of the gaping chasm between us, of the love we'd lost somewhere along the way. The next morning, I made a decision. If Mark had given up, fine. But I wouldn't let this break me. I spent the day at the hotel spa, walked along the beach, and dined alone, surrounded by couples. It was both liberating and profoundly sad. Returning home, I braced myself to face Mark, to confront the ruins of our marriage. But the house was quiet, too quiet. His parents greeted me with confusion and concern. "Where's Mark?" they asked, echoing the hollow ache in my heart. I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I didn't know where my husband was, physically or emotionally. Our anniversary, once a celebration of us, had turned into a stark, painful milestone marking the end of us. In that moment, I knew things couldn't go on like this. The distance, the silence, the pain, it was too much. I needed more, deserved more. It was time for a change, time to face the future, whatever it might hold, head on. But first, I needed to find those earrings, the last link to a time when love, not loneliness, filled our home. They were gone, just like the man who'd given them to me. And with that realization, the last piece of my broken heart finally gave way. The next few days were a blur of routine, taking care of the kids, working, and the constant, nagging thought of Mark's absence. It wasn't until I was out in the yard with the kids that the piece of the puzzle I wasn't even aware was missing fell right into my lap, or, more accurately, walked right up to my fence. It was our neighbor, Jenny, young and always friendly, but I hadn't really spoken to her since the kids came. Today, she was all smiles, waving at the kids. That's when I saw them, the earrings. My earrings. The mother-of-pearl ones Mark had given me, shimmering in the sunlight as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Nice earrings," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but feeling the sting of betrayal. Jenny touched one ear self-consciously. "Oh, these? They were a gift from someone special." She stumbled over her words, her face flushing. "Someone special, huh?" I couldn't hide my skepticism. "They look a lot like a pair I used to love. Went missing recently." The conversation was awkward, full of half-truths and dodged looks. It was clear there was something she wasn't saying. Later that evening, I confronted Mark. "We need to talk," I started, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "What's up?" He tried to sound casual, but I could see the tension in his posture. "It's over, Mark. I'm filing for divorce," I said without preamble, watching his reaction closely. He blinked, taken aback. "What? Why?" "Don't play dumb. I know about Jenny. The earrings, Mark. And everything else." I pressed on, feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. For a moment, he looked genuinely shocked. But then, his expression shifted to something darker. He laughed, a harsh, angry sound. "So, you found out?" "Yes, I've been seeing Jenny. Gave her those earrings, because I wanted to. I don't care about us anymore, Ava." His words were like a knife. But I was prepared. "I want you out, Mark. And I expect financial compensation for your adventures." He exploded at that. "Compensation? You won't get a dime from me." That's when I played my final card. "Actually, I recorded our conversation just now. Your confession. It'll be more than enough for court." Mark's anger turned to disbelief, then fear. "You can't do that." "I just did," I said, the finality in my voice marking the end of our marriage and the beginning of my fight for justice. After I decided to file for divorce, things moved quickly. Armed with the evidence of Mark's infidelity, I felt a grim satisfaction knowing I had the upper hand. The court didn't hesitate. They saw right through Mark's excuses and awarded me financial compensation and alimony for the kids. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt significant. Mark's parents, surprisingly, came out firmly on my side. It was a bitter pill for Mark, realizing he'd lost not just his marriage, but the support of his family too. One afternoon, while the kids played in the yard, Mark's mom, Diane, and I sat down for a rare moment of quiet. "We're so sorry, dear," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "We never raised him to be this way." I nodded, not sure what to say. The betrayal still stung, but seeing them stand by me meant more than I could express. "I appreciate you both. The kids love having you around." Diane reached over and squeezed my hand. "They're our grandkids. We'd do anything for them. And for you. You're more of a daughter to us now than ever." Life after the divorce wasn't easy, but it was mine. The house felt emptier, yet somehow fuller too. Full of possibility, of new beginnings. The kids adapted, resilient as ever, finding joy in the simplest moments. And me? I threw myself into work and motherhood, determined to build a bright future for us. One day, I was at the park with the kids, watching them play, their laughter a balm to my soul, when Diane joined me on the bench. "You're doing an amazing job, Ava," she said, her tone sincere. "Thanks, Diane. It means a lot, coming from you. We miss you guys when you're not around." I replied, grateful for her and her husband's unwavering support. We wouldn't be anywhere else. Those kids, and you, are our family, no matter what Mark has done, she stated firmly. The conversation shifted to work, to the kids' latest antics, to the future. It was comforting, this new normal we'd established. A testament to the fact that family isn't always defined by blood, but by the bonds you build. As the months passed, I found strength I didn't know I had. The gym became a regular escape, not just for my physical health, but for my mental well-being too. My body grew stronger, and with it, my confidence. Then, one unexpected afternoon, I ran into Mark at a local cafe. The man sitting across from me was a stranger in many ways, worn down by his choices. "Ava, you look great," he said, almost in awe. I nodded, polite but distant. "Thanks, Mark. How have you been?" "Struggling," he admitted. "Listen, I've been thinking, maybe we could start over?" "I've changed, Ava." The words hung in the air, a tempting offer to rewind time. But looking at him, I realized I didn't want to go back. I had moved forward, built a life that was whole and happy without him. "Mark, I wish you well, I really do. But that part of my life is over. The kids and we're doing great. It's best we keep moving in our own directions," I said, my voice steady. He nodded, disappointment etched on his face. "I understand. I miss the family, you know?" "I know, but we're doing just fine. Take care of yourself, Mark," I replied, standing to leave. Walking away, I felt a surge of empowerment. The encounter, brief as it was, reinforced how far I'd come. I was no longer the woman who waited for her husband to come home. I was Ava, strong, independent, and thriving. The day I moved in with Uncle John and Aunt Maria, my life took a sharp turn. Their house was nothing like the warm, loving home I'd lost. It was colder, stricter, a place where laughter seemed to echo with a hint of bitterness. Ellie, their daughter, met me with a stare that could freeze boiling water. "Great, now we've got a charity case living with us," Ellie muttered under her breath as I lugged my suitcase into what would be my new room. Aunt Maria shot her a look. "Ellie, that's enough. She's family, and we're doing the right thing." Uncle John, a man of few words, simply nodded. "You'll follow our rules here, Ruth. We expect you to contribute like everyone else." I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. I was just 11, trying to find my footing in a world that had suddenly turned upside down after my parents died in a car accident. The first few days were a blur of new rules and chores. Ellie made sure to remind me of my place at every turn. "Why are you even here? You're not really one of us," she sneered one day as we washed dishes. "Just a little orphan girl living off our charity." I clenched my jaw, focusing on the soapy water. "I'm here because your parents took me in," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, and don't you forget it. You owe us," Ellie snapped back, splashing water in my direction. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, listening to the silence of the house, missing my parents more than ever. Tears were my only solace, but I never let Ellie or her parents hear me cry. I made a silent vow to myself, I would endure, no matter what. Helping with the housework became my escape. Aunt Maria was particular about how things were done, and I learned quickly to avoid her criticism. "You call this clean?" she'd often scold, pointing at a spot I'd missed on the floor. "Sorry, Aunt Maria. I'll do it again," I'd say, grabbing the mop and going over the spot until she was satisfied. Uncle John was a stern man, his words sparing but sharp. "We're not running a hotel here, Ruth. Pull your weight," he'd remind me, even though I was already doing more chores than Ellie. Ellie, for her part, never missed a chance to make my life harder. She'd hide my sewing supplies, knowing how much I loved to sew, then feign innocence when I couldn't find them. "Looking for these?" she'd taunt, holding my scissors just out of reach. "Maybe if you're nice to me, I'll give them back." But I never retaliated. I kept to myself, burying my hurt and focusing on my sewing. It was my one joy, the thread that connected me to happier times with my parents. I started with doll clothes, moving on to alter whatever old clothes I could find. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Life with Uncle John and Aunt Maria was a mixed bag. They provided a roof over my head, sure, but it was Ellie who made sure I never forgot I was different. Amid the coldness and the chores, I found my escape in a corner of my room with a needle, thread, and old fabrics that whispered promises of transformation. One evening, as I was turning a faded curtain into a skirt, Ellie barged into my room without knocking. "What are you doing with that old rag?" she sneered, her eyes scanning my makeshift sewing station. "Just making something new," I replied, keeping my focus on the fabric under my hands. I wasn't about to let her see how much her words stung. Ellie laughed, a harsh sound that filled the small space. "You think you're some kind of designer? Please. You'll always be wearing hand-me-downs and trash." I bit back a retort, choosing silence over fueling the fire. She shook her head, smirking, and left, leaving a trail of scorn in her wake. The next day at school, I wore the skirt. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I paired it with a simple top I'd altered, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. That's when Kelly, a girl from my class, noticed. "Hey, Ruth, that's a cool skirt. Did you get that downtown?" she asked, eyeing the pattern with genuine interest. I hesitated, then decided on the truth. "No, I made it myself." "Seriously? That's awesome. You've got talent," Kelly said, her words a balm to the sting of Ellie's mockery. Encouraged by Kelly's reaction, I started spending every spare moment sewing. My room became a sanctuary filled with fabric scraps and dreams stitched into reality. Each piece I created was a step away from the identity Ellie and her parents imposed on me. One Saturday, as I was cutting into a dress that Aunt Maria had declared too old, Uncle John walked in. "What's all this?" he grumbled, surveying the mess of fabrics and patterns scattered around. "I'm making something new to wear," I said, trying to keep my voice steady under his scrutiny. He picked up a piece of fabric, twisting it in his hands. "Seems like a waste of time. You should focus on your chores, not play dress-up." His words were like a slap, dismissing not just my passion, but my efforts to rise above my circumstances. "It's not a waste," I muttered, but he was already walking away, uninterested in my defense. Despite their disdain, I couldn't stop. Sewing became more than a hobby, it was my rebellion, my claim to an identity they couldn't touch. Each stitch was a word in the narrative I was writing for myself, one where I wasn't just the orphaned niece, but Ruth, the girl who could create beauty from neglect. Things took a sharp turn after I hit 18. Ellie got herself a shiny new car for her birthday, a sleek thing that made my heart sink every time it roared to life. Meanwhile, Uncle John and Aunt Maria suddenly upgraded their lives with fancy gadgets and furniture that seemed out of place in our modest home. It was clear they were living it up, while I was left figuring out how to stretch every penny. One day, as I was mulling over the idea of getting a job post-high school, Aunt Maria dropped a bombshell. "Your parents left you some money for college," she said nonchalantly, as if mentioning the weather. I was stunned. "Really? I had no idea." "Yeah, but there's a catch," Uncle John chimed in, his tone sharp. "You're staying local for college. It's safer, and we can keep an eye on you." My dream of leaving for a big city to study fashion design crumbled. But "No buts," Aunt Maria cut me off. "We've decided. You can thank us later." I swallowed my protests. Arguing was pointless. So, I enrolled in the local college, my dreams of fashion design barely hanging by a thread. Needing to support myself and save for the future, I landed a job as an assistant secretary at a law office nearby. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. "Look at you, all grown up and working," Ellie sneered one evening as I was sketching designs. "Still playing dress-up, I see." "Better than playing spoiled brat," I retorted without looking up. My patience with her was wearing thin. She huffed, clearly annoyed, and stormed out. I couldn't help but smile a little. For once, I had the last word. Despite the setbacks, I didn't give up on fashion. Every evening, after work and classes, I'd dive into my world of sketches and fabrics, transforming Ellie's discarded clothes into pieces that felt like me. It was my rebellion, my way of holding on to the dream, even if it was stitched together from the leftovers of someone else's life. Working late again, Ruth, my coworker, Mike, asked one evening as he passed by my desk. Yeah, got a project I'm passionate about, I replied, packing up my sketches discreetly. Must be nice, having something you love doing, he said, a hint of envy in his voice. It is, I admitted, feeling a surge of pride. It's not much, but it's mine. Walking home that night, I felt a mix of emotions. Frustration, for sure, at the way my life was hemmed in by my guardian's decisions. But also determination. I might have been forced to stay local, but I wasn't going to let that define me or my future. The more time passed, the more I started to feel like I was living in a house of cards, about to crumble at any moment. Uncle John and Aunt Maria, who once lived as modestly as monks, were suddenly splurging like lottery winners. First, it was Aunt Maria flaunting a fur coat so pricey, it could have fed us for months. Then, Uncle John brought home a TV so big, you'd think we were running a cinema out of our living room. And Ellie, who never lifted a finger for work or study, was now flashing gadgets I'd only seen in glossy magazine ads. It didn't add up. I wasn't a genius at math, but even I knew our household budget couldn't magically stretch to cover luxury splurges. They were being dodgy about where all this cash was coming from, and it set my nerves on edge. One evening at dinner, with the new TV blaring some reality show in the background, I decided to poke the bear. So, where's all this new stuff coming from? Last I checked, we weren't hitting the jackpot every week, I said, trying to keep my voice light, but my words came out sharper than I intended. Aunt Maria shot me a look, her eyes narrowing. That's none of your business, young lady, she snapped, her tone icy. Uncle John, caught off guard, almost choked on his food. Coughing, he managed to say, well, I got a promotion at work. Yeah, that's it. A big one. Promotion, huh? I pressed, not buying it for a second. Must have been one heck of a jump to start throwing money around like this. Ellie, sensing tension, quickly chimed in with her usual snark. What's it to you, Ruth? Jealous much? Not all of us need to scrape by, you know. I clenched my fists under the table, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. Just curious is all. Seems weird, doesn't it? Suddenly, living like kings out of nowhere. The room went silent, the only sound coming from the TV's chatter. Uncle John and Aunt Maria exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Uncle John cleared his throat. Let's just say we've been careful with our savings, all right? No need to worry your little head about it. Careful with savings? Right. I knew something was off. The dots weren't connecting, and their answers were as flimsy as a house of cards in a windstorm. That night, as I lay in bed, the pieces of the puzzle nagged at me. The fur coat, the TV, Ellie's gadgets, and the documents. Those endless documents they had me sign, always with the excuse that it was for benefits or some other vague reason. I trusted them, never bothering to read what I was signing. But lying there, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Could those signatures of mine be the source of their sudden wealth? The deception swirling around my guardian's sudden wealth weighed heavily on me, but amidst the chaos, a sliver of light shone through. Tom. He worked part-time at the law office, a law student with a sharp mind and a kind heart. Our connection was immediate, a bond formed over shared dreams and the mundane realities of office life. One afternoon, while organizing files, our hands brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through me. We locked eyes, and he smiled. Ruth, you ever think about escaping this place? He asked, his voice low. All the time, I admitted, feeling a flush of warmth. But it feels like I'm stuck in quicksand. He nodded, understanding. Well, if you ever need a partner in crime, you know where to find me. It was a joke, but it sparked something between us, a flicker of rebellion against the constraints of our lives. Our secret rendezvous became the highlight of my days, stolen moments filled with laughter and dreams. But as our connection deepened, Aunt Maria grew suspicious. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen. "I've seen you sneaking around with that boy from the office." "Don't think I haven't noticed," she hissed, her eyes boring into mine. I tried to keep my composure. "Tom's just a friend, Aunt Maria. Nothing to worry about." "A friend, huh? Don't play me for a fool, Ruth. You're not to see him again. It's for your own good," she snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. I was stunned. "You can't control who I see or what I feel. Tom's a good person." Aunt Maria's face hardened. "I won't have you ruining your future for some boy. You'll thank me one day." I bit my tongue, anger and frustration boiling inside. It was clear she wouldn't listen. From that moment, Tom and I knew we had to meet in secret, our love a forbidden flame that refused to be extinguished. "Looks like we're modern-day Romeo and Juliet," Tom joked one night as we huddled in the shadows of a park, far from prying eyes. "I guess that makes Aunt Maria the villain in our story," I replied, trying to smile, despite the bitterness in my heart. "We'll find a way out of this, Ruth. Together," Tom said, taking my hand. His determination was comforting, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But our secret meetings couldn't go unnoticed forever. Ellie, ever the spy, caught us one day and wasted no time in running back to Aunt Maria and Uncle John. The confrontation that followed was explosive. "You're grounded. No more job, no more college until you learn your place," Uncle John declared, his face red with anger. "You can't do this. You're not my jailers." I shot back, defiance rising in me. Aunt Maria's laugh was cold and sharp. "Oh, but we can, dear. You'll learn to obey, or you'll lose everything." The threat was real, and the stakes were higher than ever. In the dead of night, Tom and I made plans to fight back, to reclaim my inheritance and our freedom. "It's us against the world, Ruth. We'll expose their lies and build our own future," Tom whispered, his words a vow I clung to. It was a chilly Thursday evening, the kind where the wind seemed to whisper secrets as it passed. Tom and I were huddled in the dim light of his tiny apartment, the only place we felt safe from Aunt Maria and Uncle John's prying eyes. The documents I had secretly photographed lay spread out on the coffee table between us, a silent testament to the betrayal I was about to uncover. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Ruth?" Tom asked, his voice laced with concern. He knew the weight of what we might discover. I nodded, my heart hammering in my chest. "I need to know, no matter how bad it is." We started with the will of my parents, a document I had never seen before. As Tom read it aloud, the reality of their love for me, their hopes for my future, hit me hard. They had left me not just their savings, but also investments and properties, a legacy meant to secure my life. And there, in clear legal language, was the clause about my inheritance coming into full effect at 18. "So, they've been lying to you, Ruth. All this time," Tom said, his voice tight with anger. "But why? How could they just use me like this?" The betrayal stung, a bitter pill to swallow. We dug deeper, examining the documents I had signed. Tom's legal knowledge helped unravel the complex web of deceit. "Look here," he pointed out. "By signing this, you basically allowed them access to your funds. They've been funneling your inheritance into their accounts." The realization hit me like a freight train. My trust, my loyalty, had been manipulated to fund their lavish lifestyle. "I can't believe this. They told me it was all for benefits, for my college fund," I said, feeling naive and foolish. "It's classic fraud, Ruth. And it's illegal." "You have rights," Tom reassured me, his hand finding mine. The next steps were daunting. We discussed lawyers, legal battles, and the possibility of going public. The thought of facing Aunt Maria and Uncle John, exposing them for the frauds they were, made my stomach churn. "We'll need evidence, solid proof that can't be dismissed," Tom said, already plotting our course of action. I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been, but the fire of justice burned within me. "Let's do it. Let's expose them. I can't let them get away with this." The determination in my voice surprised even me. I was no longer the timid girl who had arrived at their doorstep, seeking refuge. I was a woman wronged, ready to claim what was rightfully mine. The plan was set. We would gather more evidence, consult with a lawyer Tom knew, and build a case that would stand up in court. It was going to be a long, hard fight, but I was ready. Ready to face the guardians who had become my oppressors, ready to reclaim my life and my future. The days leading up to the court date were a blur. Tom and I spent every moment poring over documents, meeting with our lawyer, Mr. Henderson, and preparing our case. The evidence was solid, but the thought of facing Aunt Maria and Uncle John in court made my stomach twist in knots. "Remember, it's about the truth," Mr. Henderson reminded me as we sat in his cluttered office, papers strewn about. "Stick to the facts, and we'll get through this." The day of reckoning arrived faster than I had hoped. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and filled with the murmurs of onlookers. Uncle John and Aunt Maria sat across from us, their faces stoic, betraying no sign of guilt. "Ms. Thompson, can you confirm that you were unaware of the contents of the documents you were signing at the request of the defendants?" the judge asked, his gaze fixed on me. "Yes, Your Honor. I trusted them. I thought they were looking out for me," I replied, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. Aunt Maria's lawyer was slick, trying to paint me as an ungrateful niece, biting the hand that fed her. "Isn't it true that the defendants provided you with a home and care after your parents' tragic demise?" he asked, his tone dripping with insinuation. "They did, but that doesn't give them the right to steal my inheritance," I shot back, refusing to be intimidated. The turning point came when Tom took the stand, presenting the financial records we had uncovered. These documents clearly show the transfer of funds from Ms. Thompson's accounts to the defendants, immediately following her signature on the documents they presented to her. He explained, his confidence undercutting the defense's arguments. Aunt Maria and Uncle John squirmed in their seats, their facade finally cracking under the weight of evidence against them. After what felt like an eternity, the judge delivered his verdict. "The evidence presented clearly demonstrates a breach of trust and fraudulent activity by the defendants. I hereby order the immediate restitution of all misappropriated funds to Ms. Thompson, along with appropriate penalties for the defendants." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Justice had been served. Outside, the sun seemed brighter, the air fresher. "You did it, Ruth. You stood up for yourself," Tom said, wrapping me in a hug. "I couldn't have done it without you," I whispered, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. With my inheritance rightfully returned, I set my sights on the future. With my inheritance rightfully returned, I set my sights on the future. I started studying to be a designer, fulfilling my long-held dream. It was difficult, but interesting. And it's fair to myself. Years had flown by, turning pages filled with trials into chapters of triumph. My atelier, once just a dream woven from threads of hope and defiance, now stood as a testament to my journey. I had built a name for myself in the city, not just as a fashion designer, but as a symbol of resilience. One afternoon, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across my studio, Ellie barged in, her presence as unwelcome as a storm cloud. Time hadn't been kind to her, the arrogance still hung around her like a tattered cloak, but desperation had etched lines into her face. "Ruth, you gotta help me," she started without a greeting, her voice a mix of demand and despair. "I'm in deep, really deep. I need money." I paused, the shock of her audacity giving way to a cold sense of inevitability. "Ellie, I can't just hand you money. But I can offer you a job." Work for it, earn it. Her reaction was immediate and volcanic. A job? Are you kidding me? I don't need a job, Ruth, I need cash, and I need it now. She spat, her eyes blazing with anger. I stood my ground, feeling the weight of our shared past heavy between us. I won't fuel your mistakes, Ellie. A job is all I'm offering. Take it or leave it. Her fury boiled over. You think you're better than me now, huh? Just because you play dress up for a living? She sneered, her words laced with venom. No, Ellie. I worked hard for everything I have. I'm offering you a chance to do the same, I replied, my voice steady. Ellie's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. I don't need your charity or your lectures. You'll regret this, Ruth. As she stormed out, I felt a wave of sadness for what we both had lost, but also a deep, unshakable conviction in my choices. I had learned the hard way that no one could save you if you weren't willing to save yourself. Weeks later, news trickled down to me that Aunt Maria and Uncle John's house had been sold off to cover debts. Ellie had vanished, chasing after windfalls that would never come. The cycle of choices and consequences had come full circle. Sitting in my studio, surrounded by the vibrant chaos of creativity, I reflected on the journey. From the ashes of a broken past, I had carved out a space where dreams took shape, where resilience was the fabric of success. Tom, now my husband and partner in every sense, placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. You okay? I smiled, leaning into his strength. Yeah, I am. It's just, life's funny, isn't it? How it all turns out. He squeezed my shoulder gently. It's not just life, Ruth. It's you. You made this happen. You turned the odds into your masterpiece. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, I realized he was right. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a whole new book, one where the pages were filled with the colors of hard-won joy and the quiet strength of redemption. I was at that cozy little dive bar downtown when I first bumped into Alex. My friend, Jess, dragged me there after work, promising it'd be a chill night. Little did I know, it would change everything. Come on, Tasha, it'll be fun. Plus, you need to get out more, Jess had insisted, her arm looped through mine as we navigated through the crowded space, filled with the hum of conversations and the occasional clink of glasses. I was scanning the room, taking in the mismatched furniture and dim lighting, when I accidentally collided with someone. Watch where you're going. I blurted out, before even looking up. Sorry about that, a deep, amused voice responded. It was Alex. His apology came with a grin that, despite my irritation, I found disarmingly charming. Jess, ever the social butterfly, jumped in. Oh, hey Alex. Didn't know you hung out here too. This is my friend I've been telling you about. Alex extended his hand, still smiling. Nice to meet you, I'm Alex. Seems like fate's got a funny way of introducing us. I shook his hand, feeling a weird mix of annoyance and curiosity. I'm Tasha. I'm sure fate's got better things to do, I retorted, trying to match his casual demeanor. We found a table, and the night unfolded with laughter and stories. Alex worked as a manager at a car company, a job that seemed to suit his confident, easygoing nature. You gotta roll with the punches, you know? Can't let the small stuff get you down, he said at one point, shrugging off a question about work stress. I talked about my job as a kindergarten teacher, how every day was a mix of chaos and joy. Kids are brutally honest, no filters whatsoever. But it's refreshing, keeps you grounded, I explained. As the night wore on, I found myself drawn to Alex's straightforwardness and sense of humor. He didn't mince words, and neither did I. It was comfortable talking to him. You two seem to hit it off, Jess teased, nudging me as Alex went to grab us another round of drinks. I guess he's not too bad, I conceded, watching him navigate through the crowd with an ease that seemed to come naturally to him. When Alex returned, he handed me a beer, our fingers brushing slightly. "Thought you might like this one. It's my favorite." "Thanks," I said, taking a sip. It was good, actually. "So, what's a car company manager doing in a dive bar like this? Shouldn't you be at some fancy cocktail place?" Alex laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. "Nah, this is more my speed. Real people, real conversations. None of that pretentious crap." The night ended with promises to meet up again, no specifics, just a mutual understanding that we'd both like that. As Jess and I walked back to her car, she nudged me. "See? I told you it'd be fun." And we didn't disappoint her by getting married 6 months later. After 5 years of trying and failing to start a family, life decided to throw us another curveball. My father-in-law, the one person in Alex's family who'd always been kind to me, passed away. That left Eleanor, my mother-in-law, all alone in that big, creaky mansion of hers. Alex thought it'd be a good idea to move in with her. "It's the right thing to do," he'd said one night, trying to sound convincing. "She's all alone now, and we can save some money on rent." I wasn't buying it. "Live with Eleanor? Are you out of your mind? She's made it pretty clear she can't stand me." I shot back, frustration boiling over. Our apartment might have been cramped, but it was our space, free from judgmental glares and snide remarks about my inability to conceive. Alex sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know it's not ideal, but she's my mom and she needs us. Plus, we're barely scraping by as it is." I knew he was right about the money, but the thought of facing Eleanor's cold shoulder every day was like agreeing to live in a lion's den. "Fine," I finally agreed, but the minute she starts in on me about not having kids, I'm not holding back. The day we moved in, Eleanor greeted us with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome," she said, her voice as chilly as the drafty halls of the mansion. "I suppose we'll have to make do with each other." "Thanks, Mom. We really appreciate it," Alex replied, ever the diplomat. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The first few weeks were tough. Eleanor made no secret of her displeasure at having me around. "You're doing it all wrong," she'd snipe as I tried to navigate my way around the kitchen or tidy up the living room. Her words were like barbs, each one a reminder that I was an outsider in her world. One evening, as I was attempting to make dinner, Eleanor came in, watching me like a hawk. "You're cutting the vegetables too big," she commented, her voice dripping with disdain. I clenched the knife a little tighter, my patience wearing thin. "Well, Eleanor, why don't you show me how it's done, then? Since you're the expert," I shot back, the words bitter on my tongue. She huffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "I shouldn't have to. A proper wife would know how to do these things." That was the last straw. "Look, I'm here because your son asked me to be, not because I enjoy your company. So, how about you back off and let me cook?" Eleanor looked taken aback, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize, but then she turned on her heel and left the kitchen, muttering something about ungrateful children. A few months into our living arrangement with Eleanor, Alex hit me with a bombshell over breakfast. "I've been thinking, maybe you should quit your job and stay home," he said, not meeting my eye. I almost choked on my coffee. "Quit my job? Why on earth would I do that?" He shuffled his feet, looking uncomfortable. "Well, with Mom's health and all, we need someone to take care of her. And the house. It's a lot, and hiring a nurse plus a housekeeper? That's gonna drain us dry." I was floored. "So, you want me to become what? A full-time maid and nurse?" The thought of leaving my job, the kids I taught, it felt like he was asking me to give up a part of myself. "It's not like that," Alex protested. "It's just temporary. Until we figure something else out." I spent days mulling over it, arguing back and forth. In the end, the financial logic won out, but it felt like defeat. "Fine, I'll do it. But this is temporary, right? I said, the word temporary tasting bitter. Transitioning from a kindergarten teacher to a full-time housewife was rough. I missed the chaos of the classroom, the joy of seeing a child's eyes light up when they learned something new. Instead, I found myself knee-deep in laundry, dust, and the endless task of trying to please Eleanor. At first, Eleanor seemed to take a perverse pleasure in critiquing my every move. "You're not cleaning that right," she'd say, watching me struggle with the ancient vacuum cleaner that seemed to cough dust rather than collect it. Or during dinner, "This chicken is dry. Didn't your mother teach you how to cook?" I bit my tongue, reminding myself this was all temporary. But as the days turned into weeks, something shifted. Maybe it was the day Eleanor found me crying over a burnt casserole, or maybe she just got tired of eating poorly seasoned food, but she started to soften. "Here, let me show you how to make my meatloaf," she offered one day, her voice lacking its usual sharpness. Alex always loved it as a boy. Cooking with Eleanor was a revelation. Under her guidance, I started to actually enjoy it. We found common ground in the kitchen, of all places. I even began reading to her, newspapers at first, then novels. Our conversations grew, branching out from the mundane to the personal. I learned about Alex as a child, about my father-in-law, about the history of the family I'd married into. I thought Alex would be pleased to see his mother and me getting along. Instead, he seemed more distant. "That's great," he'd say, barely looking up from his phone when I told him about Eleanor's stories from his childhood, or the new recipe we'd mastered together. It was like he was there, but not really. "Don't you care that your mom and I are finally getting along?" I asked him one night, frustration boiling over. He looked up, surprised. "Of course, I do. It's just, work's been crazy. You know how it is." But I didn't, not really. Our worlds were drifting apart, him with his late nights, and me with my days filled with cleaning, cooking, and caring for Eleanor. His detachment stung, a reminder of the gap that had opened up between us, a gap that no amount of housework or caregiving seemed able to bridge. As time went on, I couldn't help but notice Alex's behavior changing. He started coming home later and later, always saying work was to blame. "It's just slammed at the office," he'd tell me, barely looking up from his dinner. It wasn't just the late nights, though. He began sleeping in the spare room, claiming he didn't want to disturb me with his restless nights. Then there was Sarah, Alex's sister, who seemed to enjoy poking fun at me whenever she visited. "Nice place you've got here. Fits you perfectly, old and kinda sad," she'd say with a snicker, glancing around the mansion with disdain. Every time she showed up, it was like she had a sixth sense for when we were struggling the most. "Mum, I need some money," she'd demand, not even a hello. And like clockwork, Eleanor would open her purse, no questions asked. Eleanor's health was on a steady decline, and one day, it hit a new low. She couldn't even get herself into the bath. She called for Sarah, who was over at the time, but all she got was a cold shoulder. "I'm not here to bathe you, Mother." "Figure it out," Sarah snapped, before storming out. Hearing the hurt in Eleanor's voice as she cried broke something in me. I found her in her room, tears streaming down her face. "I'll help you," I said softly, putting aside the years of tension between us. From that day on, our relationship took a turn I never expected. She started opening up, treating me more like a daughter than an unwanted guest. Amidst all this, Alex dropped another bombshell: he'd bought an apartment near his work. "It's easier with the late hours. Saves me the commute," he explained one evening, almost as an afterthought. Curious, I asked to see it. "Can I visit? Just to see where you're staying?" His reaction was swift and sharp. "It's just a basic place, nothing to see. Not a museum." The real kicker came from Eleanor, of all people. One quiet afternoon, she pulled me aside, her voice barely above a whisper. "He bought that apartment with my money. Put it in my name, too. Even the utility bills come out of my account." I was stunned. How had things gotten to this point? The man I gave up my career for was leading a double life funded by his mother. And here I was, caught in the middle of a family I was trying to fit into, now bound by secrets and lies. The mansion, once a symbol of decay and neglected history, began its transformation on a chilly morning that promised change. I had spent countless nights researching, planning, and dreaming. The thought of Sarah's mocking words spurred me on, igniting a fire within me to prove her wrong. I approached Eleanor with my proposal, armed with sketches and color swatches. "Eleanor, I've been thinking," I started, hesitating only for a moment. "The house, it's beautiful, but it could use some love. What do you say we give it a bit of a facelift?" Eleanor peered at me over her reading glasses, the corners of her mouth twitching. "You want to fix up this old place?" she asked, skepticism woven through her words. "Yes, I think it could really brighten things up. Make it feel more like a home again," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. To my surprise, Eleanor warmed to the idea. "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to freshen things up a bit. Lord knows it's been ages since anything new happened around here." Encouraged by her agreement, I threw myself into the work. The days blurred into a symphony of paint splatters, wallpaper glue, and the screech of sandpaper against wood. Eleanor would often sit by, watching as I transformed her home, piece by piece. Sometimes, she'd even offer a tip or two, her tone softer, almost nostalgic. Back in my day, we would have chosen a more subdued color. "But I must admit, this brightness brings a certain life to the room," Eleanor commented one afternoon as I stepped back to admire the newly painted living room walls. Eleanor couldn't hide her delight. She started inviting her old friends over, showing off the renovations with a pride I hadn't seen in her before. "Look what my daughter has done," she'd boast, her arm around me. It was the first time she'd ever referred to me that way in public, and it warmed my heart. Alex, however, was less than pleased. On one of his rare visits from his apartment, he walked around the house with a frown, inspecting my handiwork like a disapproving inspector. "What have you done to my house?" he finally exploded, anger in his voice. "You think you can just take over?" Before I could respond, Eleanor intervened. "This is still my house, and I say it's never looked better. She's done what none of us bothered to do for years," she declared, her voice sharp, leaving no room for argument. Alex's anger faltered under his mother's gaze, and without another word, he turned and left, the echo of his departure hanging heavy in the air. In the silence that followed, Eleanor turned to me, her expression softening. "Don't mind him. He doesn't understand. But I do. Thank you." The mansion's transformation was more than just a change of scenery, it was a rebirth, for the house and for us. In repairing its walls, I had somehow begun to mend the fabric of our family, weaving Eleanor and me closer together. The day Eleanor fell ill, everything changed. The doctors said it was a stroke, and suddenly, the mansion felt more like a tomb than a home. I was there, every day, at the hospital, holding her hand, talking to her even when she couldn't respond. Alex? Sarah? They were nowhere to be seen. It was as if they couldn't be bothered, their own mother lying there, a shadow of her former self. When Eleanor finally came home, it was a bittersweet victory. She was bedridden, a mere whisper of the formidable woman she once was. That's when Alex and Sarah decided to show up, not out of concern, but greed. I overheard them one day, in the drawing room, voices low but greedy. "The house should go to me," Alex was saying. "I'm the eldest. It only makes sense." Sarah snorted. "You think I'm just going to step aside?" She promised me the jewelry, the antiques. I've got plans for those. Their mother, their own flesh and blood, was lying helpless, not 10 feet away, and here they were, divvying up her possessions like vultures circling a carcass. Fury boiled inside me. I stormed into the room, unable to hold back. "How dare you? She's still here, still fighting, and this is how you honor her? By fighting over her things like she's already gone?" They turned to me, surprise and irritation flashing in their eyes. "This is family business," Alex snapped. "Stay out of it." Sarah just sneered. What would you know about it? You're just the help. But I wasn't just the help. I was the one who stayed by Eleanor's side, the one who cared. So, I did what they couldn't. I took care of her, day and night. I learned how to do the exercises the physiotherapist recommended, gently coaxing her limbs to move. I massaged her stiff muscles, encouraging circulation, whispering encouragement as if my words could heal. And slowly, miraculously, Eleanor began to improve. First, it was a flicker of movement, then a mumbled word. Days turned into weeks, and she started eating on her own, taking shaky steps around her room. Alex and Sarah couldn't hide their disappointment, their greedy plans crumbling as Eleanor regained her strength. I don't understand, Alex muttered one day, watching his mother navigate the hallway with her walker. I thought the doctor said. They underestimated her. I cut in, not bothering to hide my disdain. Seems like you did, too. Eleanor, for her part, seemed to thrive on proving them wrong. With every step, every word, she reclaimed a piece of herself that had been lost to the stroke. And I, who had once felt like an outsider in this family, found a sense of purpose and belonging I hadn't known I was missing. And then the unexpected happened, a second stroke, and Eleanor passed away. The day of the funeral was draped in a somber gray, the sky mourning Eleanor as much as any of us. The service had just ended, the air still thick with grief and whispered condolences, when Alex made his entrance. Not alone, but with a woman clutching his arm and 2 young children in tow. The whispers grew louder, curiosity and shock mingling in the air. This is Marissa, my wife, and these are our kids, Alex introduced them, his voice devoid of the hesitation I'd expected. My world, already unsteady from loss, seemed to tilt further. Your wife? I echoed, the words bitter on my tongue. And you think you can just waltz back here and take over? Alex's gaze was defiant. This is my family's home. We belong here. Sarah's laughter cut through the tension. Looks like you're out, dear. Mum's money, the house, it's all going to be properly managed now. Their audacity left me reeling, but I was spared from responding by the arrival of the notary, a briefcase in hand. If I may, it's time to read Eleanor's will. We gathered in the living room, the very heart of the mansion Eleanor had loved so dearly. The air was thick with anticipation and, on my part, a sliver of hope. Alex and Sarah were smirking, confident in their victory, until the notary's words shattered their expectations. To my daughter-in-law, who has shown me more kindness and love than I could have ever expected, I leave my entire estate, including the mansion and all financial assets. The room went silent. Alex's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before, while Sarah's mouth hung open in disbelief. This can't be right, Alex exploded. She's manipulated everything. Sarah chimed in, her voice shrill. You're nothing but a con artist. The notary, unfazed, pressed a button on a small device he'd pulled from his briefcase. Eleanor's voice filled the room, her image appearing on a screen. I've made my decision with a clear mind, she said, looking directly into the camera. My son and daughter have been absent, concerned more with what they could inherit than with me. But she has been by my side, caring, loving. She is my family. The video left Alex and Sarah speechless, their accusations dying on their lips. The revelation of Eleanor's true feelings, her acknowledgement of my loyalty and care, was a vindication I hadn't known I needed. Alex, defeated and angry, stormed out, Marissa and the children trailing behind him. Sarah, her dreams of wealth evaporated, slinked away without another word. The mansion, once a battleground of wills and familial duty, was now truly mine. But it felt hollow without Eleanor. I wandered its halls, her words echoing in my heart. She is my family. Starting fresh, right after the will reading that flipped my world upside down, I didn't waste any time. I filed for divorce from Alex faster than you'd believe. It was clear as day that whatever we had was buried under lies and betrayal. Plus, with the mansion and that apartment now legally mine, I had the grounds to kick him out. You need to leave, I told him, my voice firm, leaving no room for argument. The apartment, it's mine now. You and your new family need to find somewhere else. Alex tried to argue, his face red with anger and frustration. You can't just throw us out. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, Alex. I shot back, tired of his excuses, tired of the drama. He left, cursing under his breath, and that was that. He and his second family started hopping from one rental to another. I heard through the grapevine that it wasn't going well for him, but that piece of news didn't stir anything in me anymore. Adjusting to the quiet after the storm of betrayal and legal battles was no easy feat, but I found solace in the familiar walls of the mansion, now truly mine. It was during one of these quiet afternoons, as I was enjoying a rare moment of peace in the garden, that Sarah showed up, looking more worn down than I'd ever seen her. Hey, she called out, her voice lacking its usual bite. Can we talk? I stood up, brushing the dirt from my hands. Sure, Sarah. What's on your mind? She shuffled her feet, looking anywhere but at me. I'm in a bit of a bind. The debts, they're piling up, and She choked on her words, the bravado that had defined her now gone. I crossed my arms, the weight of her past actions hanging between us. You're asking me for money. It's not just for me. I've got nowhere else to turn, she admitted, finally meeting my gaze. The part of me that had endured her laughter, her scorn, wanted to turn her away. But standing there, I realized that holding on to anger would only weigh me down. Sarah, I can't help you. Not after everything. Her face fell, the last shred of hope vanishing. I get it. I was horrible to you and Mom. I just thought, maybe it's time you faced the consequences of your actions. Like I had to, I said, not unkindly. You need to figure this out on your own. She nodded, a resigned acceptance in her posture. Yeah, I guess I do. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, reconnecting with friends, and slowly rebuilding the life that had been upended. The mansion, once a battleground of familial strife, began to feel like a home again. I found joy in small things, like the way the morning light filtered through the windows or the laughter of friends gathered in the newly renovated kitchen. Alex and his new family, Sarah and her debts, became distant echoes of a life I had once been a part of. In letting go, I found peace and a sense of freedom I hadn't known I was missing. I'm sitting here in my living room, the soft hum of the old clock my late husband built marking time's passage. It's a small, cozy house, filled to the brim with memories, each corner telling a story of love, loss, and everything in between. My name's Margaret, but everyone close calls me Maggie. I'm 69 years young, a retired school teacher who's seen her fair share of life's ups and downs. My son, Jack, is a strapping lad of 42. Married for more than a decade, he's got a daughter, Lily, who's as bright and lively as a 10-year-old can be. Then there's Emily, my daughter-in-law. Our relationship's been, well, complicated, to put it mildly. Mom, you sure you don't need anything else done around here? Jack's voice pulls me from my thoughts as he stands in the doorway, concern etched on his face. I shake my head, offering him a smile. I'm all set, sweetheart. This old house is holding up just fine, thanks to your dad's handiwork. He nods, though I can tell he's not entirely convinced. Alright, but if you need anything, you call me, okay? Don't bother with Emily, you know how she gets. I sigh. Jack, she's your wife. I don't want to cause any trouble between you two. He shrugs, a bit of frustration showing. Yeah, well, things have been tense. But we'll manage. We always do. The conversation shifts to lighter topics, Jack filling me in on Lily's latest school project and Emily's plans for the weekend. But there's an unspoken tension in the air, a distance that wasn't there before. As Jack leaves, promising to visit again soon, I can't help but feel a pang of loneliness. The house feels emptier without the laughter and chaos that used to accompany my son and his family's visits. The phone rings, shattering the silence. It's Emily, her voice icy as she speaks. "Margaret, I need you to watch Lily tomorrow. Something's come up." I bristle at her tone, but my love for Lily wins out. "Of course, I'll watch her. She's my granddaughter, after all." Emily's reply is curt, a simple "thanks" before she hangs up. I stare at the phone, a mix of sadness and frustration churning within me. What happened to the days when Emily would chat with me about recipes and gift ideas for Jack? When did everything become so transactional? I spend the rest of the day tidying up the house, preparing for Lily's visit. It's in these quiet moments, surrounded by the love and care that went into building this home, that I find my strength. This house, built on memories, stands as a testament to the life my husband and I built together. And no amount of tension or harsh words can take that away from me. Back in the day, life was simpler, or so it seemed. I was still teaching, shaping young minds, while my son Jack was just starting to make his way in the world. Emily entered our lives like a whirlwind, full of ideas and ambition, which I admired, even if we didn't see eye to eye on everything. "Mom, I want you to meet Emily," Jack had said, his eyes shining with that look of love I hadn't seen in a long while. "I think she's the one." I remember meeting her for the first time. She was outspoken, a stark contrast to the quiet steadiness of my Jack. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Thompson," she'd said, offering me a firm handshake that somehow felt more like a challenge than a greeting. I smiled, trying to ease the tension. "Call me Maggie, dear. Mrs. Thompson makes me feel like I'm still in the classroom." She laughed, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "All right, Maggie it is. Jack's told me so much about you." Those early days were a mix of getting to know Emily and adjusting to the new dynamics she brought into our family. Jack was smitten, and I, despite my reservations, hoped for the best. Emily would often come to me for advice, especially when it came to Jack. "Maggie, what does Jack like to eat?" "I want to surprise him," Emily asked one afternoon, her tone softer, almost vulnerable. I found myself warming to her in those moments. "He loves beef stew, the way his dad used to make it. I can show you if you like." And so, we cooked together, a tentative peace forming between us. But it wasn't always easy. Emily had strong opinions, especially about how Jack should be advancing his career, which often led to heated discussions. "Jack needs to be more ambitious, Maggie," Emily would say, her frustration evident. "He's too comfortable here, too stuck in his ways." I'd bristle at her words, defending my son. "Jack's doing just fine. He's building his life, his way. Not everyone needs to chase after money and status." She'd sigh, rolling her eyes. "You don't get it. We need more if we're going to make something of ourselves." Despite these clashes, I saw how she pushed Jack, how they grew together. When Jack landed a well-paying job and later started his own business, I couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for Emily's drive. Yet, as their fortunes changed, so did our relationship. The visits became less frequent, the conversations more strained. Emily's requests for my help or advice dwindled until they stopped altogether. I missed my granddaughter terribly in those days. Lily was a bright spark, always eager to learn, to explore. I cherished the moments she'd spend with me, her laughter filling the house with joy. "Why doesn't Grandma come over anymore?" I overheard Lily ask her parents one day, her voice tinged with confusion and sadness. Jack was quick to reassure her. "Grandma's always welcome, sweetheart. We've just been busy, that's all." But Emily's response was cooler, more distant. "Your grandma has her own life, Lily. We can't expect her to be around all the time." I bit my tongue, refusing to let the hurt show. Instead, I focused on the love I had for my family, holding on to the hope that things would improve. It was Lily's 10th birthday, a milestone I'd been looking forward to for months. I had a special gift picked out, a book of fairy tales I knew she'd love, each story carefully chosen to spark that bright imagination of hers. But then, the unexpected happened. I didn't get an invite to the party. Not a call, not a message, nothing. It was as if I'd suddenly become invisible to them. Puzzled and hurt, I picked up the phone and dialed Jack's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful yet harried. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" "Jack, I was just wondering about Lily's birthday. Is there a party planned?" I tried to keep my voice light, but a note of disappointment must have crept in. There was a pause, then, "What do you mean?" "Emily sent you an invite weeks ago. She said you told her you couldn't make it. Said you had other plans?" My heart sank. "No, Jack, that's not true. I didn't receive anything. I wouldn't miss Lily's birthday for the world." I could hear the confusion in his voice as he replied, "That's weird. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. I'll talk to Emily and get back to you." But he never did get back to me about it. The next day, through the grapevine of small-town gossip, I found out the party was happening at their house, not out of town as I'd been led to believe. Feeling a mix of anger and sadness, I decided not to confront them about it. Instead, I dropped off the gift at their doorstep early in the morning, hoping Lily would at least know I'd thought of her. A few days after the party, I bumped into Karen, a neighbor, at the grocery store. She was all too eager to spill the details of the party, not realizing I hadn't been there. "Oh, Maggie, it was such a lovely do. Emily outdid herself this time. Shame you couldn't make it, though. Lily kept asking for you," Karen chattered on, unaware of the hurt her words inflicted. I forced a smile, thanking her for the update, and quickly made my excuses to leave. The walk home felt longer than usual, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal. The situation gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. So, I called Jack again, this time more determined. "Jack, we need to talk about Lily's birthday," I said, cutting straight to the chase. There was a heavy sigh on the other end. "Mom, now's not a good time. We're swamped with orders at work, and Emily's not been feeling great." I persisted. "I understand, but I need to know why I was told the party was somewhere else when it wasn't. Why was I lied to, Jack?" There was a long pause, then Jack's voice, weary and a bit defensive. "Mom, it's just. Emily thought it would be easier this way. She felt the dynamics have been a bit off lately and didn't want any awkwardness at the party." I felt a rush of anger and disbelief. "So, you decided to exclude me? To lie to me? Is that how we're solving problems now?" "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Emily, she's got a way of seeing things, and sometimes it's just easier to go along with it," he tried to explain, sounding exhausted. I was too hurt to argue further. "I see. Well, I hope it was worth it. I hope lying to your mother and excluding her from her granddaughter's birthday felt easier for you." "Mom, please." Jack's voice cracked a little. "It's not like that. But I didn't want to hear any more excuses. "I have to go, Jack. We'll talk some other time." Hanging up, I felt a mixture of sadness, anger, and resignation. It was clear that my relationship with Emily, and now perhaps even with Jack, was more fractured than I'd realized. After the birthday mess, things went quiet. Too quiet. My house, cozy as it is, started feeling too big, too empty. That's when I decided to get myself a little company. A small dog, a bundle of energy and love. Named him Buster. The moment I laid eyes on him, I knew he was the one to fill the house with life again. I couldn't wait to tell Lily about Buster. She's always loved animals, and I thought this might just be the thing to get her to visit. Picking up the phone, I dialed their number, heart racing a bit as it rang. "Grandma." Lily's voice, bright and cheerful, filled my ears the moment she picked up. "How are you?" "Doing just fine, love. Guess what? I've got a surprise for you." "A little dog named Buster," I said, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. "Really? A dog? That's awesome. I want to see him. Can I come over? Her enthusiasm was music to my ears. Of course, sweetheart. Anytime you want, I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. Turns out, I didn't have to wait long. That very afternoon, the doorbell rang. There stood Emily, looking as if she'd rather be anywhere else, and Lily, eyes sparkling with excitement. We can't stay long, Emily announced, barely crossing the threshold. Ignoring the tension, I ushered them into the kitchen, deciding to make the best of it. Let me get you some tea and cake. Make yourselves at home. As we settled, Emily's eyes roamed, landing on the new oven and the bits of new furniture around the house. These are new, she remarked, her tone sharp. Who bought them for you? My son did, for my birthday, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Her face turned a shade redder, anger flashing in her eyes. You shouldn't be demanding money from him like that, she snapped. Before I could even think of a response, Lily came running in, a scratch visible on her arm. Emily saw it and lost it. That dog of yours bit my daughter, she accused, voice rising. He didn't bite me, Mom. I scratched myself outside, Lily tried to explain, but Emily wasn't having any of it. We're leaving. And we won't be back, Emily declared, dragging Lily away, before I could even get a word in. Once they'd left, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I needed some sense talked into me, so I called my sister, Carol. Carol, you won't believe what just happened, I started, recounting the whole ordeal. Carol, ever the voice of reason, listened quietly before speaking. Maggie, don't let it get to you. It's clear as day that dog didn't bite anyone. Emily's just looking for an excuse. But Jack won't even answer my calls now, and neither will they, I said, feeling defeated. Give it time, Maggie. They'll come around. And if they don't, well, you've got Buster and me. We're your family too, you know, Carol replied, her voice firm yet comforting. She was right, of course. Buster wagged his tail, looking up at me with those big, loving eyes. No words needed. He was here, and so was Carol. Maybe that was enough family for now. Thanks, Carol. I needed that, I said, feeling a bit better. Want to come over and meet Buster? I thought you'd never ask. I'll be right over, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Hanging up, I looked down at Buster, who seemed to sense my mood had lifted. Looks like it's just you and me, kid. And Carol, when she gets here. We're gonna be just fine. A year. A whole year without a word, without seeing their faces. The silence was deafening, the loneliness, a constant companion alongside Buster. Then, life threw another curveball, pneumonia. It hit me like a freight train, landing me in the hospital, before I even knew what was happening. Carol, bless her, was by my side every day, worry etched deep in her brows. Lying there, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, I felt the weight of the year's silence heavier than ever. Carol, can you call Jack for me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It was a long shot, but I had to try. She hesitated, knowing all too well the silence that had filled the void between us. But she nodded, pulling out her phone and dialing Jack's number. I listened, holding my breath, as she spoke. Jack, it's Carol. Your mom's in the hospital. She's very sick. Yes, pneumonia. She's asking for you. The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Then, I heard him, his voice distant but clear. I'll come now. True to his word, Jack arrived at the hospital, a storm of emotions playing across his face. He approached my bed, taking my hand in his, eyes brimming with unshed tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have been here, he started, his voice breaking. I've been such a fool. I could barely speak, my illness and the emotion of the moment rendering me weak. Why, Jack? Why did you believe that, about Buster? He looked away, shame coloring his features. Emily told me, showed me a scratch on Lily's arm. Said Buster attacked her. I was angry, hurt. I thought you'd. I don't know. I just. Listening to him, it was clear how deeply the lie had cut, driving a wedge between us. Jack, you know Buster. He wouldn't hurt a fly. I know now, Mom. I saw him, he's gentle. Emily, she lied to me. I'm so sorry. I should have known better. He admitted, his voice laced with regret. The admission, the apology, it was bittersweet. My heart ached for the lost time, for the pain we'd both endured because of a lie. Jack, it's okay. We're here now. That's what matters, I said, squeezing his hand, offering forgiveness, because holding on to anger would only prolong the pain. He nodded, wiping away a tear. I'm going to make this right, Mom. I promise. Hearing those words, feeling his hand in mine, I believed him. Maybe this was the start of mending what had been broken, of healing not just my body, but our family too. Things were just starting to look up when out of nowhere, trouble came knocking again. This time, it wore a suit and called itself a lawyer, claiming to represent Jack. The voice on the phone was all business, saying he needed me to sign some documents, because Jack was abroad and in a bind. Something about the whole thing smelled fishy to me. First thing I did was try calling Jack, but wouldn't you know it, his phone was as good as a brick. No answer. That's when I got that sinking feeling in my gut. I rang up Carol, told her to come over quick. Something's not right, I told her, pacing the floor until she showed up. When the lawyer showed up, all smiles and handshakes, I knew I had to play it smart. He pushed a stack of papers towards me, saying it was all just formalities, that Jack needed this done pronto. I'd like a minute to read these, if you don't mind, I said, trying to buy some time. Oh, there's no need to worry. It's all straightforward, he assured me, but I wasn't buying what he was selling. I needed Carol to get a look at these documents without him hovering, so I suggested a little stroll in the garden. Let's get some fresh air, then I'll sign, I proposed. To my surprise, he agreed. While we were outside, Carol was inside, snapping pictures of the documents with her phone. Turns out, those papers were nothing short of a nightmare. They were trying to get me to sell my house for peanuts and ship off to a nursing home, claiming I was too sick to take care of myself. Before I could process it all, Emily stormed in, red-faced and yelling like a banshee. Just sign the damn papers, Margaret. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I stood my ground, refusing to be bullied. I'm not signing anything until I talk to Jack, I said firmly. That's when I called the police. Emily was livid, spewing lies about me having dementia, trying to paint me as some doddering old fool. The police showed up, and Emily switched gears, playing the concerned family member. But we had proof. I showed them the audio recording of the lawyer's spiel, and Carol showed them the photos she'd taken of the documents. Emily's tune changed real quick, then. The police took her in for questioning, and the whole house of cards she'd been building came tumbling down. After the fiasco with the lawyer and Emily's plot being foiled, things started moving quickly. The police had enough evidence to start unraveling the tangled web of lies that had been spun around me. But the real turning point came when Jack finally got back from his trip abroad. He was shocked to learn about the chaos that had unfolded in his absence. Jack came straight to my house, a mix of worry and anger clouding his face. Mom, I just landed and heard about what happened. Can you fill me in on everything? I sighed, looking at my son, seeing the confusion and hurt in his eyes. Jack, it's been a mess. That lawyer, the one Emily hired, tried to trick me into signing away the house. And if it weren't for your Aunt Carol, I might have fallen for it. Jack's face turned red with anger. That's unbelievable. Emily told me she was just taking care of some family business while I was gone. I had no idea she was plotting something like this. Carol, who had been a rock throughout this ordeal, chimed in. We caught everything on tape, Jack. And I took pictures of the documents they tried to get Maggie to sign. It's clear as day what their intentions were. Jack shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe she'd go this far. To think, she used our daughter to further her lie. I'm going to confront Emily about this. She needs to explain herself. The confrontation between Jack and Emily was inevitable. He left our house, determined to get to the bottom of things. When he returned, he was alone, his expression somber. Mom, Emily, she admitted to everything. Said she felt cornered, that she didn't know what else to do. I told her it's over. We're getting a divorce. I can't be with someone who'd put my own mother through something like this. Hearing Jack's words, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth was finally out, but sorrow for the pain my son was going through. Jack, I'm so sorry it's come to this. But I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right. Jack nodded, pulling me into a hug. I should have listened to you sooner, Mom. I'm just glad you're okay. In the days that followed, we worked on healing the rifts that had formed. Jack was a frequent visitor, often bringing Lily along, who was overjoyed to spend time with Buster and me. The ordeal had brought us closer, reminding us of the importance of family and truth. After the storm comes the calm. That's how it felt once everything with Emily was settled. Jack got the divorce finalized, and though it was a tough period for him and Lily, they started to find their rhythm again. Life at the house felt fuller, happier with their frequent visits. It was like we were all breathing a bit easier, ready to welcome whatever came next with open arms. One sunny afternoon, as I watched Jack and Lily playing with Buster in the garden, I realized how much things had changed. Jack walked over, settling down beside me with a sigh. Mom, I've been thinking, he started, watching Lily throw a ball for Buster. I want to start fresh, maybe even move closer to you. What do you think? I smiled, the idea warming my heart. I think that's a wonderful idea. Having you and Lily nearby would be a dream come true. Lily ran over, breathless and laughing. Grandma, did you see how fast Buster is? Her eyes sparkled with joy, so much like her father's. I sure did, sweetheart. He's got quite the sprint on him, I replied, hugging her close. As we sat there, chatting about school, friends, and all the little things in between, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. The ordeal we'd gone through had somehow brought us closer, strengthening the bond between us. Later that week, Carol dropped by for her usual visit. Over cups of tea, we reflected on the past few months. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, our lives found a new normal. Jack and Lily did move closer, just a few streets away, making spontaneous visits a regular occurrence. The laughter and love that filled my home were a balm to my soul, healing old wounds and bridging any gaps that had formed. One evening, as we all gathered for dinner, Jack raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, to family, and to a future filled with love and laughter. We've come through the storm, and now it's time to enjoy the sunshine. We all echoed his sentiment, clinking glasses and sharing smiles. It was a simple moment, but it held the weight of everything we'd endured and overcome together. When I first met Alex at a crowded finance conference, it wasn't exactly love at first sight. We bumped into each other, coffee in hand, both of us running late for the same session. Watch it. I snapped, as a bit of my coffee splashed over the rim. Sorry about that, Alex shot back, not missing a beat. Guess we're both trying to cram knowledge in at the last minute, huh? Despite the rocky start, we found ourselves laughing about it later. Turns out, we had a lot in common, especially our drive for success and independence. After dating for a year, filled with heated debates and passionate makeups, we decided to take the plunge and get married. But not in the traditional sense. We both loved our jobs. I was climbing the ladder in financial accounting, and he was making waves in sales. So, we laid it all out, blunt and straightforward. Screw traditional, Alex said one evening, his eyes serious for once. Let's not be one of those couples who end up fighting over money. I nodded. Yeah, let's do a prenup. Keep what's yours, I'll keep what's mine. If things go south, we walk away clean. The decision to sign a prenuptial agreement was less about distrust and more about mutual respect for our hard-earned careers. We didn't want the potential mess of untangling assets if things didn't work out. Plus, it felt good knowing we'd both entered the marriage as equals. Splitting the bills was a no-brainer. 50-50, Alex agreed. And no whining about who spends more on groceries. I laughed at that. Deal, but you're not getting out of housework. I'm not your maid. Fair enough, he conceded. But I don't do windows. That's how we started our married life, on a foundation of honesty, equality, and a touch of humor. We opened a joint account, strictly for shared expenses, rent, utilities, and those occasional fancy dinners to celebrate our wins. It was a system that worked perfectly for us, allowing us to maintain our financial independence while building a life together. Our biggest achievement came when we finally saved enough to buy an apartment right in the city center. It was a dream come true. The day we got the keys, we stood in the empty living room, surrounded by boxes and painting supplies, both of us grinning like idiots. Look at this place, I said, spreading my arms wide. Our very own piece of the concrete jungle. Alex wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. It's perfect. Just needs a bit of paint and maybe some of those fancy curtains you like. I leaned back into him, feeling the warmth of his body. We did it, babe. 50-50, all the way. Yeah, he whispered, kissing the side of my head. Our perfect little empire. That apartment wasn't just a home, it was a symbol of our partnership, our commitment to walking side by side as equals. We were thrilled, basking in the glow of our joint achievement, blissfully unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. But in that moment, everything felt possible. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. Life with Alex started off on cloud nine. We were the perfect team, or so I thought. We were both climbing our career ladders, supporting each other, or at least that was the plan. Things started changing when Alex's mom, Mrs. Thompson, began dropping by more often. I never really clicked with her. She had this old-school vibe about women's roles, and me working full-time didn't sit well with her. One evening, as I was slogging through spreadsheets, Alex and his mom were in the living room, whispering. I could hear bits and pieces, her voice sharper than a knife's edge. I finally took a break and walked in, just in time to hear Mrs. Thompson say, Emma's always buried in her work. Doesn't she know a wife should care for her husband? Alex, bless him, tried to play peacemaker. Mom, things are different now. Emma's job is important to her, and it helps us out a lot. But Mrs. Thompson wouldn't have it. Back in my day, we knew our priorities. Your wife should be at home, making sure you're looked after, not glued to a computer screen. I couldn't bite my tongue any longer. Mrs. Thompson, I respect your views, but times have changed. I'm not just going to sit at home. Alex and I agreed on this lifestyle before we got married. Alex chimed in, trying to smooth things over. Yeah, Mom, we're doing things differently. We're partners in everything. Mrs. Thompson scoffed. Partners? A woman's place is in the home, not competing with men. Look at your sister, a proper woman, caring for her family. That hit a nerve. Being a proper woman doesn't mean giving up on my career or ambitions. I shot back, my patience wearing thin. The conversation ended with Mrs. Thompson huffing. Well, I just hope you know what you're doing. A family needs more than money. After she left, Alex and I had a heart-to-heart. Babe, you know I'm on your side, right? He said, taking my hands in his. My mom's from a different time. We'll do things our way. I nodded, wanting to believe him. I know, Alex. But it's not just about your mom. It's about us sticking to our guns, making sure we're on the same page. He hugged me. Always, Em. We're in this together. But that conversation with Mrs. Thompson was just the start. Her visits became more frequent, her comments more pointed. And each time, Alex's assurances seemed to lose a bit of their strength. I started to feel like I was on my own, defending our choices, our lifestyle. It wasn't long before this tension spilled over into other parts of our life. The apartment that had been our happy place, our sanctuary in the city center, started to feel less like home. We were thrilled when we bought it, our own little slice of the city. It was supposed to be our fortress against the world, but instead, it began to feel like a battleground for old versus new, tradition versus ambition. Our happy acquisition was turning into a reminder of the growing divide between us, a divide that seemed to widen with every visit from Mrs. Thompson and every silent dinner that followed. Our home, once filled with laughter and plans for the future, now echoed with the unspoken tensions of a partnership strained by external pressures and unmet expectations. The days turned into a pattern I couldn't ignore. I kept the pace at work, juggling numbers and deadlines like a pro, all for the sake of our future. Alex, on the other hand, started showing up home way earlier than usual. At first, I thought it was a temporary thing, but then the pattern stuck. The joint account, once buzzing with regular deposits from both of us, began to feel the absence of his contributions. And then, they stopped altogether. One evening, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. Alex, we need to talk about the joint account. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He sighed, a bit too heavily. Babe, sales have been in the dumps. I'm not making as much as before. It's a tough time at work. I wasn't panicking, we had savings, and my job was stable. Okay, I get that. Things are rough everywhere. But since you're home early now, maybe you could help out more around here? I suggested, hoping he'd see the logic. Alex, sprawled on the sofa, phone in hand, didn't even bother looking up. Help out? Like how? I was flabbergasted. You know, household stuff. Cooking, cleaning. We're a team, right? He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and annoyance. Emma, come on. You know that stuff's your department. I've got enough on my plate. My jaw dropped. My department? What century are you living in, Alex? I'm working just as hard, if not harder. I thought we agreed to share responsibilities. He shrugged, his attention already drifting back to his phone. That's different. You're better at it, anyway. That hit me like a slap. I was counting on an equal partnership, not this outdated script he was suddenly following. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Is this really how you see our marriage? Alex let out a frustrated sigh. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? It's just how things are. Just how things are? I repeated, my voice rising. No, Alex. That's not how we agreed to things. I'm out there busting my ass every day, same as you, or at least I thought so. And then I come home to a second shift, because you've decided you're too good for woman's work? He didn't respond, just kept his eyes on his phone, and that silence said everything. I was seething, hurt, and suddenly very alone in what I thought was a partnership. This wasn't the deal. This wasn't the man I thought I married. We were supposed to be equals, but here I was, feeling like I'd somehow been demoted in my own home. The morning sun barely crept through the curtains when I realized the alarm hadn't gone off. In a frenzy, I scrambled out of bed, my heart racing against the clock. Alex, ever so calm, was sprawled on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone, seemingly oblivious to the chaos. Alex, I pleaded, half-dressed and struggling to find my other shoe. I'm running late, and it's going to be a marathon day at work. Can you please handle dinner tonight? My voice was a mix of hope and desperation, clinging to the slim chance he'd step up. He spared me a brief glance, his attention tethered to the screen. Yeah, he mumbled, a non-committal grunt that did little to assure me. Got it, dinner. Sure. I paused, the knot in my stomach tightening. You mean it, right? Because last time, the memory of coming home to an empty table flashed in my mind, a silent testament to forgotten promises. Alex's annoyance was palpable as he cut me off. I said yes, didn't I? Go on, don't worry about it. His dismissive wave was the final nudge out the door, leaving me to rush into the day with a heavy heart. The hours at work were a blur, each task piling atop the next, leaving no room for breath or thought. By the time evening wrapped its fingers around the city, I was spent, my body and mind crying for respite. The thought of coming home to a warm meal offered a glimmer of comfort in the exhausting routine my life had become. But the apartment greeted me with silence, an eerie echo of my solitude. The kitchen, untouched, bore no signs of a meal prepared, the table as barren as it had been that morning. Confusion gave way to a sinking realization as I noted Alex's absence. With a trembling hand, I dialed his number, each ring a beat in the mounting dread. His voice, slurred and distant, pierced the quiet. Yeah? Where are you? I thought you were going to handle dinner. I managed, my voice a mix of frustration and disappointment. His laugh, a sound I once adored, now felt like a sharp jab. Nah, decided to crash at my sister's. You know, where a real dinner happens. Not like our place, eh? The word stung, a cruel reminder of the chasm between us. So, my working late to support us makes our home less of a home? Is that it, Alex? My voice cracked, the hurt spilling over. Look, Emma, it's not just about dinner. It's about feeling appreciated, you know? Like someone actually cares I'm there. His words, thick with accusations and alcohol, laid bare the fissures in our marriage. The line went dead, but the silence that followed was anything but peaceful. I stood in the middle of our kitchen, a room that once felt like the heart of our home, now just a hollow space. The tears came then, unbidden and relentless, mourning not just a missed meal, but the love and partnership I thought we had. The tension between Alex and me had been simmering just below the surface, but the events of the past few weeks had turned up the heat, threatening to boil over at any moment. The day it all came to a head was like any other, with the weight of unresolved grievances hanging heavy in the air. I had just walked in from another grueling day at work, my mind a whirlwind of numbers and deadlines, when I noticed the mail scattered on the kitchen counter. Among the usual bills and flyers, a statement from our joint account caught my eye. The balance was far lower than it should have been. Heart pounding, I rifled through the transactions, my confusion turning to disbelief and then to anger as one entry stood out, a large withdrawal made by Alex. Alex! I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. He emerged from the living room, phone in hand, a look of feigned innocence plastered on his face. What's up? He asked, trying to keep his tone light. I slammed the statement on the counter, pointing at the damning entry. What is this? Why did you take out so much money without talking to me first? He shrugged, a casual dismissal that fueled my frustration. Oh, that. Just had to cover some expenses, you know how it is. Expenses? I echoed, incredulous. For what? And why didn't you discuss it with me? He sighed, the facade of nonchalance slipping. Look, Emma, I needed a new car. The old one's been acting up, and I got a good deal on this one. A new car? With our savings? I was struggling to keep my voice steady, the betrayal stinging more than the financial loss. We're supposed to be saving for our future, not squandering it on impulsive buys. Alex's patience was wearing thin. Impulsive? I think I deserve a little something for myself, don't you? It's not like I'm asking for much. Not asking for much? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. You're making decisions with our money, our future, without even a thought for me. Where's the partnership in that? The room charged with tension, our frustrations boiling over into a heated argument that left us both spent and angry. The distance between us felt insurmountable, the divide widened by every harsh word and accusation. As we stood there, the air thick with unsaid things, the phone rang, slicing through the silence like a knife. I answered, my voice raw from shouting. It was Mrs. Thompson, her tone sharp and accusing from the get-go. Emma, what's this I hear about you denying Alex a simple pleasure? A man works hard, he deserves to enjoy the fruits of his labor. I was stunned into silence for a moment, disbelief giving way to anger. Mrs. Thompson, with all due respect, this is between me and Alex. And for the record, he didn't work hard for this. It was our savings, for our future. Her scoff was audible, dripping with disdain. You young people and your future. A good wife supports her husband's decisions, not questions them. In that moment, I knew something had to change. But whether we could bridge the gap between us, or if it was too late for repairs, only time would tell. What was clear, however, was that the path ahead would be anything but easy. Life has a way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect them. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received a letter that knocked the wind out of me. My great-uncle, a man of few words and solitary habits, had passed away. I hadn't seen him in years, and our interactions were nothing more than occasional, awkward conversations during the rare family gatherings. Yet, here I was, holding a letter from a lawyer, telling me he had left me everything he owned. His entire estate, his savings, everything was now mine. It was surreal, to say the least. I remember staring at that letter, the words blurring as a mix of emotions washed over me. Sadness, confusion, and a creeping sense of responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready for. And then there was Alex. His reaction to the news was like he'd hit the jackpot. "Babe, do you realize what this means? We're set," he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with a mixture of excitement and, dare I say, greed that I hadn't seen in him before. A week has passed, and I returned home tired after another crazy day at work. What I saw shocked me. There, in the midst of what should have been an ordinary evening, was my husband, Alex, beaming like he'd won the lottery, surrounded by his family, all of them basking in the glow of my great-uncle's unexpected generosity. "Look who's finally home!" Alex exclaimed, thrusting a glass of champagne into my hands, his excitement palpable. "We're celebrating your big windfall, babe." The sight of the lavish spread from the city's priciest restaurant laid out on our table, and the merriment in their eyes, felt jarringly out of place. My mind raced, trying to piece together the surreal scene before me. "Quit my job today," Alex announced proudly, as if he'd just made the most normal decision in the world. "Why work when we've got this fortune, right?" His grin widened, oblivious to the shock that must have been written all over my face. His parents, his sister, her husband, their kids, all were there, acting as if they'd just won the jackpot. And then, as if on cue, Alex added, "Oh, and before you join us, the dishes won't wash themselves, you know?" Laughter erupted from the crowd, a chorus of approval at his joke. But to me, it sounded like nails on a chalkboard. Fury coursed through me, hot and unstoppable. Here I was, after a day of grueling work, expected to play the maid at my own celebration? It was madness. I was on the brink of unleashing a torrent of anger, ready to set things straight, when Mrs. Thompson, ever the matriarch, called for a serious conversation. Dragging myself to the armchair, every ounce of my being screamed in protest. What could she possibly say that would make any of this better? My mind was a whirlwind of indignation and disbelief. Were they really so oblivious to the audacity of their actions? Did they see me as nothing more than a benefactor for their whims? As the absurd proposal hung in the air, courtesy of my mother-in-law, suggesting we use my inheritance to build a colossal house for what felt like the entire clan, I could only stare in disbelief. The idea that not only would we all live together, but that this would somehow excuse the entire family from ever working again, was ludicrous. Alex, beaming as if he'd just unveiled the master plan of the century, chimed in. "Think about it, babe. We'd never have to worry about anything ever again." The room was filled with nods and murmurs of agreement, as if they'd all been let in on the plan before this moment. As I looked around at these people, my supposed family, I felt more like an outsider than ever. Breaking the celebratory bubble with a voice steadier than I felt, I said, "I'm filing for divorce." The room fell silent, the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex's smile faltered, his parents' jaws dropped, and his sister's glass of champagne paused midway to her lips. My mother-in-law, always quick on her feet, laughed dismissively. "Oh, darling, even if you do, the law's on our side. Alex gets half of everything you've got." Her smug assurance was the last straw. "Actually," I countered, a bitter laugh escaping me, "our prenup says otherwise. Alex gets nothing of mine if we divorce." The shock that rippled through the room was palpable, their wide eyes meeting my firm gaze. "And another thing," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I'll be taking all the furniture, every appliance, everything I paid for. And Alex, you'll be hearing from my lawyer about the unpaid bills and expenses you've conveniently ignored." The fantasy bubble they'd been living in burst right then and there. One by one, I watched as their faces fell, the realization that their free ride was over dawning on them. Without another word, I ushered them towards the door, their protests and pleas falling on deaf ears. As the door closed behind the last of them, the silence that enveloped the apartment was suffocating. Yet, beneath it all, a sense of relief began to wash over me. I was free from the expectations, the manipulations, and the sheer audacity of a family that saw me not as a person, but as a means to an end. After the dust settled on the courtroom battles and the ink dried on the divorce papers, I started anew in the house my great-uncle left me. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life on my terms, free from the constraints of a marriage that had become suffocating. Alex, now living with his parents, found himself grappling with the realities of a day-to-day life that required him to work, really work, for the first time in a long while. Every so often, he'd call me, his voice tinged with a desperation I hadn't heard before. "Come on, can't we just wipe the slate clean and start over?" he'd plead, the echoes of his once confident demeanor replaced by uncertainty. His mother, too, took to calling me, her tone uncharacteristically sweet, a stark contrast to the sharpness I'd grown accustomed to. "Dear, wouldn't you reconsider? For the family's sake?" she'd coo, as if the words could erase the past and mend what had been broken. Each time, I couldn't help but laugh, a sound of freedom and relief. "No, thank you," I'd reply, my voice steady and sure. "I'm quite happy with where I am now." And happy I was. With the chains of a loveless marriage behind me, I found joy in the simple things. I traveled, exploring corners of the world I'd only dreamed of seeing. I threw myself into charity work, finding fulfillment in helping those in need, both people and pets alike. The gratitude in their eyes, the genuine smiles, and wagging tails brought a sense of purpose back into my life, a reminder that there was so much good I could do, so much love I could give, without expecting anything in return. The liberation from my old life, from the expectations and demands of others, allowed me to rediscover myself. I was no longer defined by my relationship with Alex or his family. I was my own person, complete and content in my independence. The house my great-uncle left me became more than just a place to live, it was a sanctuary, a space where I could grow, heal, and thrive. It was here, among the memories of a man who had quietly supported me from afar, that I built a life filled with passion, purpose, and peace. As I look back on the journey that brought me here, from the turmoil and strife to the calm and contentment, I'm reminded of the resilience of the human spirit. Life, with all its twists and turns, had led me to this moment of liberation, a testament to the strength within me and the promise of a future filled with endless possibilities. I grew up in a pretty standard family, just me and my folks, living in a small, cozy house at the edge of town. My dad worked the late shifts at the factory, and my mom was a cashier at the local grocery store. Money was tight, but we got by. I was their only kid, and they poured all their love into me, even though I wasn't the easiest child to care for. From a young age, I was always the sickly one, catching colds that seemed to linger for weeks and struggling with a bunch of allergies that kept me indoors more than out. I was thin, way too thin for my age, and my clothes? Well, let's just say fashion was the least of our concerns. School was a battlefield. I tried to blend into the background, but somehow, I always stood out, and not in a good way. My classmate, Sarah, she made sure of that. Sarah was everything I wasn't: popular, pretty, and always dressed like she was about to walk into a photo shoot. One day, trying to dodge the bullies, I was late to class. Slipping into my seat, I hoped for a quiet day. That hope vanished the moment Sarah noticed me. "Look who decided to show up," Sarah sneered, loud enough for the whole class to hear. "Thought you were too sick to come to school, or did you finally find something to wear that didn't come from a charity bin?" Her friends laughed, echoing her cruelty. I wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to hide. I kept my eyes down, whispering, "Just leave me alone, Sarah." "What was that?" she mocked, stepping closer. "Can't hear you. Speak up." Before I could muster a response, Mr. Jenkins, our math teacher, entered the room, cutting off whatever Sarah had planned next. The rest of the day, I kept to myself, speaking only when spoken to, and even then, my words were barely above a whisper. At home, things were different. It was my safe haven. My parents, seeing my downcast eyes at dinner, exchanged worried glances. "Nellie, honey, you barely touched your food." "Something happened at school today?" my mom asked, her voice full of concern. I shrugged, pushing my food around my plate. "It's nothing. Just tired, I guess." My dad, quiet until now, put down his fork. "You know, Nellie, you can talk to us. Whatever it is, we're here for you." I nodded, knowing they meant every word. But explaining the day's humiliation felt impossible. "Thanks, Dad. I'm just really tired. Think I'll head to bed early." Dragging my feet towards the school gates, I braced myself for another day of dodging glares and whispered insults. My backpack felt like it weighed a ton, loaded with textbooks and the heavy dread of facing Sarah and her clique. As I navigated the crowded hallways, trying my best to become invisible, I heard the all-too-familiar voice that made my stomach twist in knots. "Hey, ghost girl, try not to vanish before class starts," sneered Mark, one of Sarah's loyal sidekicks. His nickname for me, a jab at my pale complexion and tendency to keep to myself, echoed off the lockers, drawing snickers from nearby students. I quickened my pace, not daring to look up. "Just ignore him," I muttered to myself, but the words felt hollow. The day's first challenge was surviving homeroom. Mrs. Parker, ever oblivious, droned on about the importance of attendance just as I slipped into my seat at the back. I barely settled in when Sarah, draped in her latest fashionable outfit, sauntered in, her entourage in tow. "Nice of you to join us, Nellie. We were worried you got lost in your closet of hand-me-downs," Sarah quipped loudly, tossing her hair as she passed my desk. A chorus of laughter followed. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. "Just leave me alone," I shot back quietly, more to my desk than to her. "What was that, Nellie?" "Speak up, we can't hear you," Sarah taunted, turning to face me with a smirk. I shook my head, choosing silence over a battle I couldn't win. The bell rang, a temporary reprieve, but the relief was short-lived. Each class transition felt like running a gauntlet, with Sarah and her crew lying in wait to hurl their next insult or snide comment. Lunchtime was no sanctuary either. I found a secluded spot under an old oak tree, a safe distance from the cafeteria's chaos and cruelty. As I nibbled on my sandwich, thoughts of just disappearing consumed me. "Hey, why you sitting all by yourself here?" a voice interrupted my solitude. I looked up to see Jake, a guy from my English class. He wasn't one of Sarah's crowd, but I was wary all the same. "Just like the quiet," I replied, hoping he'd take the hint and leave me be. He shrugged, unfazed, and sat down beside me. "Suit yourself. Sarah's being a real piece of work, huh?" I was taken aback by his bluntness. "You could say that," I admitted, surprised by my own candor. "Listen, Nellie, you can't let her get to you." "She's all talk," Jake said, his tone earnest. I wanted to believe him, to find the strength to stand up to Sarah, but the words felt like a distant dream. Easier said than done. I mumbled, my gaze fixed on the grass below. The bell, signaling the end of lunch, snapped me out of my reverie. Gathering my things, I offered Jake a small smile. Thanks for, sitting with me. No problem. See you around, Nellie, he said, heading back to the building. The rest of the day passed in a blur. With each class, I counted down the minutes until I could escape back to the safety of my home. But the day wasn't without its lessons. Jake's unexpected kindness was a glimmer of hope, a reminder that not everyone was against me. School had become a nightmare for me, one I couldn't wake up from. Every day was a repeat of the last, dodging insults, hiding from Sarah and her gang, and trying, unsuccessfully, to blend into the background. It wasn't long before the stress of it all started to take a real toll on me. I found myself feeling physically sick, my old ailments flaring up with a vengeance alongside new ones. Headaches, stomach aches, you name it, I had it. I was a mess, inside and out. One evening, I was curled up on the sofa, a blanket wrapped around me, trying to shake off the latest in a long line of migraines when Grandma came over. She had this way of seeing right through you, and that day was no different. Nellie, this isn't just about being sick, is it? She asked, her voice soft but firm. I tried to shrug it off. I'm fine, Grandma. Just tired. She wasn't having any of it. Nonsense. You're sick, yes, but it's not just physical, is it? It's those kids at school, isn't it? I hesitated, then the floodgates opened. I told her everything about Sarah, the bullying, the constant dread that filled my days. Grandma listened, her expression growing more concerned by the minute. When I finished, she sighed deeply. Nellie, your body is reacting to your stress and anxiety. It's making you ill. All these problems with your classmates are affecting your health. I was stunned. Could my being bullied be the reason I was always sick? Seeing my confusion, Grandma explained further. Stress can have a real, physical impact on your body. It's important we address not just the symptoms, but the cause as well. The next day, Grandma sat down with my parents and me to discuss a plan. It was clear that continuing to attend school wasn't an option, not if things stayed as they were. After much discussion, my parents decided to switch me to distance learning. It was a big change, but one that felt necessary. The difference was night and day. Away from the constant harassment and anxiety, I started to heal. My headaches became less frequent, my stomach settled, and I found myself actually able to concentrate on my studies without the looming shadow of Sarah and her taunts. I was sitting at the kitchen table one afternoon, working through a set of math problems, when Mom came in to make a cup of tea. She watched me for a moment, then said, "You seem different, Nellie. Better. Happier, even." I hadn't really thought about it, but she was right. I guess I am, I admitted. It's weird not having to worry about what's going to happen at school every day. Mom nodded, a relieved smile spreading across her face. I'm just glad to see you feeling better. We should have done this sooner. The transition wasn't without its challenges. I missed the few friends I had, and adjusting to a new way of learning took time. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I found myself grateful for the change. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. One morning, as I logged onto my first virtual class, my mom knocked softly on my door. "Nellie, you okay with this? Missin' your friends?" she asked, peeking in with a concerned look. I paused, considering. Kinda, I admitted. But it's better than before. At least I can focus now. She nodded, her eyes softening. You just shout if you need anything, okay? I'm right downstairs. As the days turned into weeks, I found a rhythm to my new routine. The subjects I used to struggle with began to make sense, thanks to the absence of distractions and the patient guidance of my online teachers. One afternoon, after a particularly successful math session, my dad came home early and found me at my desk. "Look at you, assing your classes without those bullies breathing down your neck," he said with a grin, ruffling my hair. I couldn't help but smile back. Feels weird, Dad. Good weird, though. Like, I can actually do this. That's 'cause you can, Nellie. Always could, he replied, pride evident in his voice. Yet, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The lack of social interaction began to weigh on me. I missed the face-to-face conversations, even the ones that weren't always kind. The silence of the house, once a sanctuary, started to feel more like a cage. I started to look for ways to fill the social void. I joined online study groups and even started a virtual book club with a few classmates I'd reconnected with. It wasn't the same as hanging out in person, but it helped. One evening, as I closed my laptop after a long study session, my grandma called. "How's my favorite granddaughter?" she asked, her voice warm and comforting. "I'm your only granddaughter, Grandma," I teased, smiling at our ongoing joke. Details, she chuckled. "How's the distance learning going?" "It's good, actually. I mean, I miss seeing people, but I'm doing better in school now," I shared, feeling a sense of achievement. "That's my girl. You're stronger than you know, Nellie. Don't forget that," she said, her words lifting my spirits. Prom night was something I had dreaded for months. The very idea of attending filled me with anxiety. My parents, however, thought it would be good for me, a chance to close this chapter on a high note, as they put it. Despite my protests, I found myself nodding along to their encouragement. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, Nellie. You might regret not going," Mom said, her eyes hopeful. I couldn't bring myself to argue further, even though every fiber of my being screamed against it. So, there I was, in a simple dress that my mom and I had picked out, standing awkwardly at the back of the gym, trying my best to blend in with the walls. The gym was transformed, barely recognizable, with all the decorations and lights. Groups of my classmates, all dressed up, were laughing and dancing, enjoying the night. I couldn't help but feel like an outsider, watching the festivities from my lonely corner. As the evening dragged on, I decided to make a quiet exit. No one would notice I was gone anyway. But just as I was about to slip out, Sarah, in her stunning dress, blocked my path. "Leaving so soon, Nellie? The party's just starting," she sneered, her voice dripping with malice. I tried to step around her, but she shoved me back, a little too forcefully. "Watch where you're going," she hissed, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. The sudden push caught me off guard, and I stumbled, drawing the attention of those nearby. In seconds, I was surrounded by Sarah's friends, their laughter piercing the loud music. "Look at her, can barely stand straight," one of them mocked, pointing directly at me. Sarah leaned in closer, her voice loud enough for her circle to hear. "Guess some things never change, huh, Nellie? Always the clumsy one." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and something else, anger, maybe, or just a deep, aching sadness. "Just leave me alone, Sarah," I managed to say, my voice shaky, but loud. "Oh, I will, don't worry. Wouldn't want to ruin my night by spending another minute with you," she retorted, her words like daggers. The group's laughter followed me as I turned and ran, not stopping until I was safely outside, away from their taunting faces. Tears blurred my vision as I made my way home, the night air doing little to cool my flushed cheeks. My parents were waiting up when I got home, their faces lighting up at the sight of me. But as they took in my tear-streaked face and the defeated slump of my shoulders, their smiles faded. "What happened, honey?" Mom asked, rushing over to me. I shook my head, unable to find the words to explain the humiliation and hurt. "I just want to forget tonight ever happened," I whispered, the tears starting again as I let my parents wrap me in their arms, their concern and love a small comfort in the face of my pain. After the prom disaster, I was more than ready to put high school behind me. College was my chance to start fresh, to be someone new. I chose to study medicine, driven by a deep-seated desire to help others, maybe even understand a bit more about my own struggles through learning about the human body and mind. My first day at medical college felt like stepping onto another planet. Everyone was buzzing with excitement, talking about classes and future careers. I found myself outside the main lecture hall, clutching my schedule, when a girl next to me said, "Hey, you look lost too. First year?" "Yeah," I replied, grateful for the conversation. "Nellie," I introduced myself. "I'm Zoe. Nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted with a laugh. Zoe and I stuck together, finding our way to the lecture hall. Sitting down, I felt a nervous excitement bubble up inside me. This was it, my chance to really make something of myself. As weeks turned into months, I started to come into my own. I was doing well in my classes, even making a few friends. Zoe and I became inseparable, studying together and encouraging each other through the tough exams and endless assignments. Our hard work paid off, and I found myself thriving in a way I never had before. The subject of psychosomatic medicine particularly fascinated me, the idea that the mind could have such a profound effect on the body. It resonated with my own experiences, and I dove into the research with a passion. One day, after presenting a paper I'd written on stress and its physical manifestations, my professor pulled me aside. "Nellie, your work is impressive. Have you considered specializing in this field?" I was taken aback. I hadn't really thought about it. He nodded thoughtfully. "Think about it. You have a knack for understanding the complexities of the human mind and body. It's a rare gift." His encouragement bolstered my confidence, and I began to see a clear path ahead of me. I was going to use my past, my struggles, and turn them into something positive. I was going to help people heal, not just physically but emotionally too. As the years passed, I graduated from medical college with honors, my sights set on specializing in psychosomatic medicine. My family was proud, and I, for the first time in a long time, was proud of myself too. I had turned my life around, and I was ready to face whatever came next with a newfound strength and determination. Zoe hugged me tight on graduation day. "Look at us, we made it." "Yeah, we did," I said, smiling. "Here's to new beginnings." And as we threw our caps into the air, I felt a sense of closure. The hurt and isolation of my past were behind me. Ahead lay a future full of possibilities, a chance to make a real difference. And I was ready for it, more ready than I'd ever been. After pouring years into researching the profound effects of psycho-emotional stress on the body, my work started gaining traction. I'd written extensively on how the turmoil of our minds could physically manifest, leading to real, often severe health issues. Stress, anxiety, the grind of daily life, it all could lead to negative reactions within the body, spiraling into chronic conditions. What fascinated me most was finding ways to reverse or manage these effects, by addressing the root, the mind state. This journey of mine caught the eyes and ears of the medical community. Invitations flooded in, asking me to share my findings with peers, specialists, and even skeptics. It wasn't long before my name became somewhat of a buzzword in medical circles, a symbol of a fresh perspective on holistic healing. My big break came when I was invited as a speaker at the annual health conference. The topic I chose, the mind-body connection, psycho-emotional stress and physical health, struck a chord. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawn on many faces. This wasn't just theory, it was reality affecting countless lives. I walked off that stage to a sea of applause, my heart racing not from fear, but exhilaration. I'd overcome my dread of public speaking, facing down an auditorium packed with professionals, and I'd held my own. The buzz from my presentation didn't just end with applause. Post-conference, an invitation came my way that would have seemed unimaginable years ago, a dinner with the who's who of the health sector. Government officials, insurance bigwigs, clinic heads, and industry specialists, all were to be there. As the day of the dinner approached, a mix of excitement and nerves took over. This was more than just a meal, it was a networking goldmine, a chance to discuss potential collaborations, to take my work to the next level. I stood in front of my mirror, makeup in hand, determined to look my best. I wasn't just representing my research, I was representing myself, my journey. I chose my dress carefully, the one that always made me feel confident and at ease. As I applied my makeup, I allowed myself a moment to reflect on the significance of this evening. It wasn't about looking no worse than the other women there, it was about feeling my best, about walking into that restaurant with my head held high, knowing I belonged. At this elegant dinner, surrounded by the health sector's elite, I felt like I was finally where I belonged. Compliments flowed my way, each one boosting my confidence more than the last. As the evening wound down, I decided it was time to head home, still riding the high of the night's successes. But as I made my way through the hallway, a familiar voice stopped me in my tracks. It was her, Sarah, my high school nightmare. "Wow, look at you. Finally figured out how to dress, huh?" Sarah's voice, laced with that same condescending tone, filled the space between us. I turned to face her, finding her just as beautiful and just as arrogant as she'd been back in school. The years had changed us both, but it seemed her spirit remained untouched by time. "Long time no see, Sarah," I said calmly. Sarah laughed, a sound that once would have sent me spiraling into anxiety. "Seriously, though, how much did you have to borrow to afford a night here? This place isn't cheap." I met her gaze, steady and calm. The fear and insecurity she once inspired in me had long since faded, replaced by a strength forged in overcoming and succeeding, despite people like her. Before I could respond, the organizer of the dinner, Mr. Thompson, approached, his concern evident. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking from me to Sarah. I nodded, offering him a smile. "Yes, thank you. Just catching up with an old classmate." Sarah, fueled by alcohol and unchecked pride, continued her tirade, oblivious to the discomfort she was causing. She even went as far as to bring her husband into the mix, beckoning him over with the promise of joining in on her mockery. However, the moment her husband, who I recognized as the director of a company interested in my research, realized the situation, his demeanor changed drastically. "I'm so sorry," he began, his apology directed at me with a sincerity that took me by surprise. "My wife's behavior is unacceptable." He then turned to Sarah, his frustration boiling over. "Do you realize what you've done? You're jeopardizing important opportunities with your behavior. I've been looking forward to collaborating with Dr. Nellie Stewart here, and you're here making a scene." The sight of him leading Sarah away, her protests echoing down the hallway, was surreal. Moments later, he returned alone, his expression apologetic. "I can't tell you how sorry I am for my wife's behavior," he said, his voice earnest. "I hope this doesn't affect our potential collaboration. Your work is invaluable." After the dinner, as I was leaving, I saw her, my former tormentor from school, sitting outside on the steps, her makeup smudged from tears. She looked up as I approached, her eyes red and puffy. "Hey, can you talk to him for me? You seem to have his ear," she hiccuped, her voice a mix of desperation and vodka. I paused, looking down at her. This was the girl who made my life a living hell back in the day, now asking for my help. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm not getting involved," I said firmly. "This is between you and him." "But you're like, doing so well." "He listens to you," she persisted, stumbling over her words. "That doesn't make it my business," I replied, my tone leaving no room for further discussion. I left her there, on the steps, a mess of her own making. Walking home, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. I had come full circle, from the girl who was bullied, to someone who stood her ground, unafraid. The news of her divorce came through the grapevine. I'd be lying if I said it didn't give me a sense of vindication. As for me, life was looking up. I had found someone, a man who appreciated me for who I was, someone kind and interesting. We were talking about a future together, something I never thought I'd have. Continuing my work, I felt more motivated than ever. My experiences, both past and present, fueled my passion and my resolve to make a difference. It was a strange journey, but it led me here, to a place of happiness and contentment. And for that, I was grateful.